I was a library captain and everything.
Your school had a library captain?
Yeah.
What is a library captain? Hi, I'm Elizabeth Flux.
I'm Ben McKenzie.
Welcome to Pratchett, the monthly Terry Pratchett book club podcast.
Each month we discuss one of Terry Pratchett's books with a special guest.
This month we're talking about Reaper Man, where Death finds himself at his own door and has no choice but to build a new one.
And our guest is Pratchett fan Sarah Pearson. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi.
It's such a pleasure to have you. I mean, we were quite mysterious with our listeners as to why we were inviting you on the show and how we found you. But we found you via a television show, didn't we?
Yeah, no, I was on Hard Quiz late last year.
And what was your specialist subject?
Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, that's right.
Funny that.
Yeah. And they asked you some really fiendishly difficult questions.
They really did. I mean, that is kind of the point.
Yes.
To be fair, I thought I was going to be talking about Terry Pratchett's Discworld rather than just Terry.
Right.
So some of my study materials weren't exactly perfect, but point of the show is not to do well. The point of the show is to allow yourself to be roasted by Tom Gleeson.
And you certainly did that.
Yes. There was a great zinger I got against him, but it didn't make it to air.
Oh, what did you say?
I compared him to a tall and spiky cactus. I suggested I would plant a tall and spiky cactus in the mug to remember him by.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember one of the questions that they asked you that was really difficult. I would not have got it right, which was, in which book did they first mention Hogswatch or the Hogfather? I forget which one it was, but it was one or the other.
Oh, yes, I remember this one now.
Because you had a good guess. I thought your guess was quite reasonable, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was either.
It was one of the early Discworld books.
Yeah, it's actually now almost just over a year since I recorded it.
Yeah.
But I've only watched the episode the once, so I don't even remember what my guess was, but something early. I knew that they'd mentioned it before Hogfather.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I guessed something early, somewhere in the first 10.
And of course it turned out to be the worst kind of question. It was a trick question because the first time it's mentioned is not even in a Discworld book.
Mm. Oh, it was Dark Side of the Sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I have read, but only the once.
That's just rude.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty
It's sort of the proto-Discworld book, yeah.
Yeah.
That's like... All of those questions were really very rude.
Yeah. I guess, like you say, that was the point, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But was it fun? Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I did. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool.
Tom is somehow very good at making you laugh while also really having a good go at you. You didn't feel bad about. You felt proud that you were still standing upright afterwards.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear it.
And now I'm picturing him as a sentient cactus, so...
I'll always think of him that way now.
Yeah. Oh, God. He might tweet at me. That would be bad.
You just send some spiky responses.
Yeah.
Now, you're no stranger to the world of television, though, because you work in the television industry and I think you've got a really interesting job because you work as a captioner.
Yeah, that's right. I've been doing that for coming on 9 years now. It'll be 9 years in January. My job is literally to watch television. Basically, I'll watch through a program. If I was at work this week, it would definitely be Survivor and Bachelor. Right. And just transcribe what they say and decide what their weird noises should be rendered like.
Do you do that live?
We have a live department and a pre-recorded department. Mm-hmm. I'm in the pre-recorded. We work very closely together, though. I remember a 15-minute conversation about how to caption the noises the eventual Eurovision winner this year made. We had one of the live department people come out to us and say, I do not know what to do with this. We have to prep this for when she goes to air in the final. Help. Yeah. And yes, it was a 15-minute conversation of, what do we do? How do we make this make sense? And how do we explain this if you've never heard sound? So, yeah, it's a very interesting job. We're all nerds, and it's a really fun place to work.
Yeah. But we are here to discuss a particular book. So here we go with the blurb. Death is missing. Presumed gone? Which leads to the kind of chaos you always get when an important public service is withdrawn. Meanwhile, on a little farm far, far away, a tall, dark stranger is turning out to be really good with a scythe. There's a harvest to be gathered in. It doesn't really say much about the plot of the book. I mean, it's the central premise of the book, really. But I mean, that's the interesting thing, is I think we'll get to fairly quickly, is that this book is really kind of at least two plots side by side.
Yeah, it's definitely, to me, it's two books. Just sort of winding in and out around each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's two novellas, tangentially connected. Whereas like Ankh and the Moorpork, together to form a greater thing.
These stories are linked by a brass bridge of some sort.
Better make sure someone's guarding it, otherwise...
Someone might steal it.
Yeah.
But we don't start in Ankh in this book.
We don't really start anywhere. We start talking about Morris dancing. That's my favourite
true.
dancing.
Is it your favourite dancing?
Yeah, because I thought I was the only person who'd heard of it, like when I was a child, because I was like, oh, look at this funny thing. And then just in the last 3 years, it's cropped up quite a lot of places. Like, I know this book is more than 3 years old, or is it? But it was even in an Australian film, 3 Summers, where the one of the main characters does Morris dancing, and it's a joy, really. It's just men in white costumes with flowers sometimes and bells jumping around and banging sticks together in a joyous sort of frolic.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been long familiar with Morris dancing. I went to university with the same, the right kind of nerds. And I know many people who've Morris danced, not just men and women.
Oh, really?
Which, is not the traditional way, but, screw the traditional way.
Well, I mean, when I think about it, I just sort of see this hazy movement of white fabrics everywhere, and it's like, and I'm sure this is something to do with my heritage. My father's from the UK, and it's like, I feel like I should know about this. It feels culturally important, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I've conflated it now in my mind with the fish slapping dance from Monty Python, because I think they did a Morris dancing thing and they also did that. Or they're wearing Morris dancing gear while they do it. There's just...
It is. I think it is meant to be a bit Morris-esque,
the
fish slapping dance. It's certainly weird.
Yeah.
But, it gets a mention, interestingly, is not at all part of the plot in this book. I mean, it'll come back in another book as a very important part of the plot, but not here. It's really only mentioned at the start and the ending. So which felt a bit weird to me. I was like, why did you mention this? You don't really say why it's... But
if you're going to tug at the fabric of reality, you have to point out that Morris dancing exists as a thing that is real.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. But we very quickly move on from there to the matter at hand, which is that some people are not very happy with the way Death conducts his business on the Discworld. And this is the first time we meet these characters, the auditors of reality.
The revenue.
With the revenue. Yeah, the revenuers. They're kind of... I mean, we all hate them, right?
Well, I mean, I find them kind of interesting because I think we all know that person, even though they purport to not be people and not have identity. I think we all know that person who's like, these are the rules, this is not how it should be, make it how it should be. And it's in absence of any kind of reality or sort of, there's no flexibility in it at all. There's no flexibility in them. And I mean, the moment any one of them has flexibility, says I, bang, gone.
Yeah.
They can't move, I guess, is what I would say.
They're kind of like Philosopher's Stone Aunt Petunia, because they describe her as like a curtain twitchy type who like is very stickler for the rules, who'd love to call the criminal hotline on her neighbours, and I kind of get that vibe from them. If they had to exist in a different world, they'd be the sticklers for the rules.
Yeah, it's sticklers on steroids, really.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't do that because it's illegal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course.
That's right. It's against the rules.
Not to be a stickler, but...
Hey, my line of work is all sticklers.
Yeah. I found it very interesting because we get introduced to Azrael right near the start of the book as well. Azrael, the death of the entire universe, for whom all other deaths are the sort of, subsidiaries, if that's the right word. But I like that they've gone to talk to him, like he's the supreme authority, or is it just that they're talking to him because it's a death they want to talk about? I wasn't clear about that.
I thought they were talking near him and he's just there and they're talking to each other.
Right.
But I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of seems like the space they're in, if they want to discuss things, that is also where he happens to be. That he's just that large that they could try and find a private meeting room, but it wouldn't work because it'd probably be behind his kneecap or something.
Do you think they'd be allowed to replace death without Azrael's say-so?
I think there's a fair bit of the Pratchett death that we know and love in Azrael. I think you see it at the end.
So I think maybe they are the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. So like we would like to get rid of death. So we've filled out all of the correct forms. We've gone into the building we need to go to. We should probably run it past this guy specifically, but he's nearby, so that's all right. So technically, by the rules, we're okay. Ethically, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because they're not about ethics.
No.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, they're kind of anti-ethics, really, because
Yeah.
that's their problem with death. Yeah, and he gets fired. And I liked my favourite touch of this is that when he finds his lifetimer, it's quite small and made of gold.
Yeah.
They've given him a gold watch to send him off.
Oh gosh,
nice.
I totally missed that illusion. That's
so
great.
Yeah, I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he does get to keep his horse.
Binky.
Yeah.
Oh, Binky.
And it's interesting because he has that conversation with Albert, his manservant, who we met previously in Mort, and then sort of just says, I'm off to spend my life because I have some time to spend, And Albert just sort of gets left behind, and there's no sort of mention about what's going to happen to him. He just sort of stays behind in Death's Domain. And he's just going to wait for the new guy, whoever that might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Making porridge.
Yeah.
Pass the time.
Yeah. Well, what else is he going to do?
Feed the bees. Do you feed bees? Bees feed themselves and you just sort of like are near them?
You keep bees. But we go from one kind of insect to another because we then get our illusion with the mayflies, which it was funny reading about that. We only read Truckers a couple of episodes ago, where that's comparing the lives of gnomes to humans in a way that's a bit like mayflies. And here we've got the mayflies, having their arguments about, you don't get hours like you used to get.
Yeah,
these
sun used to be
minutes.
more yellow and a bit higher.
Yeah.
I remember when there was a cow, it stood there for like 40 minutes.
Yeah. And they have their religion about how you get eaten by the great trout. But nobody really knows what the trout is. Just some people disappear and then there's ripples on the water. That means someone's gone to the happier place. Yeah, I thought that was all really cute.
I do enjoy, I think one of the not quite as old mayflies starts to regard things with suspicion right after the oldest mayflies go. He's like, why do I have to go to the middle of the pond?
Yeah.
Why is that me?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a skeptics movement.
Yeah.
Mayflies.
Birth of atheism among the mayflies.
I mean, you have to think quite fast if you only live for a day, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, fast is relative.
I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, with the trees and they're moving, their concept of time is so long that they don't even notice someone's cutting into them until the tree's cut down.
Yeah, that was done so well. Like and then he was gone, like mid-sentence, and then his because he was 31,057 and then he was making the street signs for like all these different houses.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was just such a Pratchett-y thing. And there's an allusion. There's a footnote later on. Oh, it's not even a footnote. Just someone mentions, aren't there like these cuckoos who live up in the ram tops who make their own clocks to nest in? And you're like, yeah, but they don't keep very good time. And it's just that sort of very Pratchett-y Discworld-y thing where there's something that we would make on our world, but it just grows somewhere on the Discworld. Yeah.
Which is kind of relevant for the second half of the story, I guess, as well.
That's true. And I do love that when we eventually get to the part where there's all these different deaths popping up, they talk about how the death of the trees is just a sound. It's just the sound of axes. It doesn't have a form. No. And you're like, oh, that's creepy. Oh.
Can you imagine if that was like the human death? It's like the sound of axes. Like, I'd rather have the scythe guy.
I don't think anyone would do any logging.
Because we're reading this after moving pictures, the other thing that this reminded me is that I was too ready to see allusions to films. And so every time they said Elm Street, I was thinking, it's like Nightmare on Elm Street. There's nothing to do with Nightmare on Elm Street, but it's just every town has an Elm Street, including Ankh-Morpork, it seems.
He did also throw in a casual Indiana Jones, so like you weren't completely off base there.
That's true, and quite a few not so casual aliens references towards the end, but we'll get to those.
Because we're getting a bit long-winded, so we should probably...
We should push on.
Congratulations on that. That was great.
Thank you. This is the opposite reaction to that poor fool who got the terrible pun reaction in a later scene.
Oh, yeah.
Where everyone just like, was real serious about his pun. But Wendell, like one of the oldest wizards, 130, as wizards know they're going to die, he knows that his death is coming up and he's real sad that no one is taking the hint that he's going to die. And so he sort of sadly shuffles into his room, and then suddenly there's a surprise party for him, like a death party.
Well, they call it going away.
Yeah.
It's such a nice euphemism.
Well, I know, again, it's that sort of metaphor for retirement as well. It's like they keep checking their watch. In case, it's like, aren't you supposed to go now, Wendell? Is it now, Wendell? Oh. Here's some cake, Wendell. Would you like to go?
We decided about the snacks and we put a nice paper hat there for you and everything. And
yes.
But yeah.
All very awkward. It's like, you're going to leave, but you haven't yet. We don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's the walking in the same direction as someone once you've said bye kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting that I felt so attached to Wendell. I was sad about him, even though we'd only met him one book earlier, and he was kind of a
dirty old
jerk.
Man.
Yeah. But in this book, you have a lot of sympathy for him because first of all, he's going to die, and then he doesn't die, which is potentially even worse from his perspective.
Well, he does. It's more like he called an Uber and no one came to pick him up.
So he's like, do I try and get to the party by myself or do I go back into my house?
Yeah.
I had not thought about death as being an Uber before, but now I'm going to think of that all the time.
Well, I guess I feel like with death all through Pratchett, it's like he shows up and he says the right things and he takes you away. And that's kind of what it feels like. He's like, okay, I'm out of my body. I'm dead. All right, where's the womb for my rebirth?
Because he's coming back as a lady. He's decided.
Oh, yeah.
Which kind of jives with the lecherous old man, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he decided he was going to be like a liberated lady. Like he wasn't going to go in for all that cookery stuff.
No.
Maybe when Wendell Poons comes back, he'll be played by Jodie Whittaker.
Oh, the complaining that would happen.
Oh, gosh, he's going to regenerate.
Yeah.
But so they had that really nice little description of him wandering around because wizards are promised like a personal meet and greet with death, like because they've got like a VIP thing. So when he doesn't show up, he knows it's strange and he's sort of like, we'll blow this for a lark. I'm not going to hang around in the in-between. And because he's a wizard, and as far as we know, he alone out of all the people who die in this book fights his way back into his body.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right, because we don't find out about anybody else doing that.
No.
Yeah.
It seems like most of them end up in the crystal ball, or at least wherever the crystal ball connects to.
Yeah, they're wandering around in the spirit realm,
Yes.
not going on to wherever they're supposed to go on to.
They're waiting at the train station.
Annoying one-man bucket.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, he's sort of doesn't really know what to do, but when he goes back into his body, he's suddenly sort of able to connect to it and figure out how to make it go, even though it's not alive anymore. And he finds he can think clearly and he can see clearly and he can walk properly and he's incredibly strong because he's effectively got complete control over his body because he's doing it through force of will, I suppose.
Except for the spleen, because he's like, what does a spleen do? And having done uni, I was like, what does a spleen do? Because I've forgotten, because you can have it removed and be pretty much okay. So I asked the doctor and they were like, oh, well, spleen's ridiculous. We should just have 2 livers. And the spleen is basically the elephant's graveyard, but for blood. It does other stuff too, but like blood goes there to die.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm imagining all these little goblins going there because
Little red blood cell goblins.
Yeah, hemogoblins.
What would the death of blood look like?
Like a white corpuscle? I don't know.
Yeah. Like a spleen.
Like a spleen.
Well, thank you. I didn't know. I actually have a note here that says simply spleen, page 28. What is a spleen? That's actually a really good question.
Yeah, please explain.
Yeah, as far as I was concerned, it might as well have said squiddly splooge, like I just don't know.
It may as well be called that because it's yeah.
This takes the other wizards by as much surprise as it takes him because he sort of goes into the grand hall and everyone's like, hang on.
And he's super strong, kind of like that episode of Buffy where she hasn't had enough, like something happens, like she's too cheerful, so she is too strong. It's like she smashes her alarm clock through her chest of drawers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really great how he explained why zombies lurch, because they're having to think about how the body works, whereas normally your body just bodies. But why would you be super strong in that situation?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And maybe it's because instead of distributing your brain's sort of motive power energy across your whole body and all its autonomic functions, instead you're just directing all of the brain's attention to just the bit you're thinking about moving. So, and I'm just making this up as I go along, but when you think I'm going to punch that wall, all of your willpower goes into punching the wall and none of your brain's attention is on standing up straight or breathing or doing anything else. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like if you had like a body of water all rushing down a thing and normally it's going off into different tributaries, but suddenly all the other ones are switched off, all the water would gush into one and be too much and overflow the banks. So
Yeah. But I think also it's just tradition.
yes.
Yeah, I kind of think of the gym where they're like, engage your core. And it's like, maybe it's just very, very easy to engage muscles. Like without the sort of the part of you that's used to not thinking about how they work and not really in touch with how they work. Maybe it just puts you in touch and it goes, oh, these are all the buttons I press, which you don't consciously think about.
Yeah.
Just button mashing.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Playing Street Fighter. Hitting the buttons harder. Oh, that's good. You know, the original Street Fighter actually worked where it had buttons where the harder you pressed them, the harder your character punched. And that's why everybody remembers Street Fighter 2 and no one remembers Street Fighter 1 because it was terrible. I'm pretty sure there was a version of Street Fighter 1 that didn't have those buttons, but I think that's a true story. I'm going to have to corroborate that for the show notes.
Yeah, I've written
That
Wizard
seems-
Can't Deal.
Yeah, this seems like a one-way trip to breaking your arcade box, surely.
Yeah, I think that was a bit of a problem. I don't think they were very long-lived,
Or
those
that was
machines.
the point. And so then they sold more arcade machines.
Maybe, but they wanted more people to play them.
They had
wanted
planned
money to go
obsolescence
through
in
them.
the 80s.
True. They did do that. But they did, and look, they have planned obsolescence on the Discworld for people as well, but Windle's not really having any of it in this case.
I'm sorry to ruin that, but what a great segue you just did.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Yeah, that was very smooth.
Oh, thanks.
Unlike Windle's passage through the university, which just wreaks havoc everywhere.
And so the wizards decide they've got to do something about him. They think, oh, he's an undead. There's a great joke where he's going, oh, he can't pass water. Zombies can't pass water. Like, what? And they go, no, don't cross running water. Sorry, yeah.
We should get a black cat and put it on his grave, but he hasn't got one yet.
Yeah.
We can get him one and buy a cat and then put the cat on.
Oh man, they just try everything and nothing works.
And I feel like they like the attitude, I think a lot of people when faced with a zombie is like, oh crap, kill it. Theirs is, our friend is not as he should be. We must fix this. It's a benevolent thing they're trying to do in a very haphazard sort of way.
Except the bursar who's like well freaked out.
Well, yeah, this is kind of the beginning of the bursar and his problems.
Yeah, and we never, his name's not mentioned here either. I think we do. I said in the last episode we never find out his name. I think we do eventually find out what his name is, but we certainly don't find it out anytime soon. And this is, yeah, as you say, this is where he's really starting to become unhinged and not feeling well. And look, when you think about the things that happened to him in the previous book and this book and his kind of mental state and what he'd prefer to be doing, yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. But yeah, he's not having a good day. And neither is Windle, you know, like they try and thrust garlic in his face. There's a great scene where they play, you know, guess the holy symbol. They keep showing him different holy symbols of different gods and he's like identifying them all, but none of them like freak him out.
It's like, oh, here's Offla.
Yeah. And eventually they decide that, well, the thing that should work is we'll bury him at a crossroads.
So they choose the busiest crossroads they can possibly get, and the peaches are getting bruised.
Yeah.
That's terrible. They're holding up all the traffic.
There's just no good time for roadworks unless it's like 2 a.m. on Boxing Day. That's like the one time of the year it's okay
Yeah.
to dig up a road.
Yeah. But I mean, you gotta dig up roads, don't you? Otherwise.
Not in Rome. You just threw your garbage out the window and it made a new road eventually and just built your house higher.
Really?
Yeah, that's not. I don't know if that's like one of those things that's like everyone thinks is true, but it's not true.
I think that's reasonably true with a lot of cities. I know at least Seattle and Chicago have got like under spaces
Catacombs
That-
of old buildings.
of old buildings, yeah. Layers of them.
Well, I mean, we know that's true of Ankh-Morpork as well, because
Yeah.
in Men-at-Arms they go visiting the old city underneath
exactly.
in the sewers. Yeah. Or what has become the sewers, which is just the streets of the old Ankh-Morpork. Yeah, but they dig it up. They try and bury him in a coffin. At least they give him like a nice burial.
He got to choose his own coffin, which is nice.
Yeah, and they're going to put a stake through his heart as well, just to be sure. Except that they couldn't get a stake, so
Yeah, the butcher's was closed or something, so they just give him a celery.
yeah, it felt very Python-esque.
Yeah,
that
there's
scene.
just comedy of errors.
And the conversation before that, they're like, oh, yeah, you need garlic with the steak. It's like, oh, well, if it's a good steak, you just need a bit of oil and maybe a bit of sauce. Like, you don't need the garlic as well. So
Yeah. I think one of the other things that I really enjoyed throughout this whole bit is Ridcully, who's getting a bit more engaged with what's going on, but still like just no suffering of any fools. Like I lost track of the number of times there was a sentence which just read, "Shut up," said the Arch-Chancellor. And I'm like, yes, this is fantastic. But he's on board. He's like, we've got to sort this out, rather than in the previous book where he's a bit like, no, I can't be holding with this, so I'm going to go off and do something else. So it's nice to see a little bit of evolution there of his character.
Yeah, he's not just drinking hat whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he is also doing that.
Well, until his hat whiskey gets eaten by something else. But
that was
by a compost heap.
Oh yeah.
The compost heap. I kind of picture him as like a slightly magical Teddy Roosevelt. I picture him as like a magical Teddy Roosevelt, and because they talk about him like what ho and let's hunt and let's fish, and he's got like fishing flies on his hats and stuff, and it's like I actually really enjoy him because he's so different from the other wizards.
Yeah,
he disturbs them all the time.
Yeah. But he gets stuff done.
He does.
You know? I mean, mostly by just sheer bloody-mindedness. And I do like the way he's described as, like, not wanting to... Like, he just doesn't listen to people. But if they're still explaining something to him after about 4 minutes, then he knows it's worth paying attention to. Whereas if they've given up by that time, he's like, it's not worth my time.
Well, I guess I wish we could all live our lives like that, hey?
Well, I guess we could, but, like, there'd be a lot of... silence.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out whether it would be silence or noise, and I think if we all did it, it'd be silence.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But Windle is buried in the coffin, and finally they do get him buried under the crossroads, but then he sort of realizes that it's not working. He's still in his undead state, and that's when he finds a matchbook hidden in the coffin that mentions something called the Fresh Start Club, and decides that, all right, well, I've got to do something about this. I might as well go and find this place and see what it's all about.
Yeah, then he Kill Bills his way out of the coffin.
He does, and digs a hole through the ground to get back to the university and then find his way to the Fresh Start Club. But that whole sequence, there's about 30 pages there where death does not appear. The book, he just sort of shows up, gets fired, runs off, and then he's just not in the book for ages. And then...
not to be a stickler, arguably death is not in most of the book because suddenly it's Mr. Sky. No, wait, it's not Mr. Sky because no one's called Mr. Sky.
That's right, yeah.
It's Mr. Door.
Mr. Door. That's true. Because he turns up somewhere in the...
Ramtops.
It's in the field below the Ramtops. It sounds like... I think they refer to it as Octarine Grass Country, which means it's kind of the same place where Mort grew up.
So it's like the Rambelows?
The Ram's Bottoms.
I sort of picture the Ramtops sort of being somewhere above their heads at all times.
Yeah. It's like pastoral.
Does that mean that Lady Sybil's family's from like near there because she's like Ramkin?
Could be, yes.
Maybe there were bigger swamp dragons back in the Ramtops.
Well, we know... Well, because the previous book mentions that Ridcully has hunting dragons.
Yeah, true.
You'd have to think they were at least a little bit bigger than the swamp dragons.
And I mean, Ridcully's essentially from the Ramtops as well, which because of the time we know he spent with Granny Weatherwax, never really left the Ramtops.
Yeah. So it's all a bit interesting. And I thought that was a bit weird because... You know, here's death. He's decided to spend some time on the Discworld, like spending his life. And he goes to a country place and he decides he's going to get a job and become, you know, a farmhand.
Is it because he's been put out to pasture or is that the thing?
That could be why. I don't know. But he never gives a reason for why he's come to this particular place. And I kind of just guessed that it was... You know, he's not that familiar with any places aside from where he's been for work, except that he came to a place like this to recruit Mort as his apprentice. And I thought maybe that's got something to do with it, but then why isn't he visiting him? And there's just that one line later in the book where he's talking with the woman who's about to employ him at the part we're talking about now, Miss Flitworth, who asks, you know, if he's got any children. He says, I have a daughter, but we've lost touch, which is the only reference to the previous events. And I was just like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's nice that you're not relying on the story of the previous story, but at the same time, if you are going to die and you're going back to the mortal world, like surely that is the time when you reconnect with your family.
Maybe he's doing it for her own good, though. Like he could be like, they need to live their separate mortal life without me because they did choose to go away. So that suggests that they don't want any of that supernatural hocus pocus.
Yeah, but on the other hand, like he does promise to visit, and they seem to want him to. I think when we get up to soul music and Hogfather, I think it'd be really interesting to see to reread how that is kind of explained, because it's kind of. I mean, what do you think, Sarah?
I mean, I've got my sort of first encounter with Pratchett was actually the 2 animated Cosgrove Hall things, particularly soul music. And I've got memories of Isabel being in that and talking about how they don't want Susan to grow up around him. That I think perhaps that there's like a fundamental disagreement in how they want to live their lives. And he, I think, respects the boundary that they may have set up.
Right.
So they could have had Susan by then, and that's where like the
Yeah.
line was drawn. They could have had lots of visits before then, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then had one that's family falling out with like, oh yes, I'll give you the money to send them to private school. No, we'd like them not to go to private school or to your old school kind of thing. And then
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember if there's sort of similar explanation in the actual book, but to me that sort of, the way I interpret it is that they've put that barrier there. That's not necessarily something he's put there, and being deaf, he tends to just respect people.
Yeah. Yeah.
also Mort sucks, and I wouldn't want to hang out with him.
Okay, yeah, full on, but fair, harsh but fair. But for whatever reason, he has come to this place and he gets himself a job as a farmhand for Miss Flitworth on her her rundown farm.
For 6 months a week, and he has to sleep in the barn because it wouldn't be proper.
No.
And you know, I it's been such a long time since I read this book, and I have clearer memories of some of the other ones, either because I'd read them more often or because I'd read them more recently. But this one, I couldn't remember if there was going to be a romance plot between Death and Miss Flitworth, and I kind of wanted there not to be. It's kind of, I have this thing about Doctor Who as well, like I don't like it when they do a romance plot between the Doctor and one of his companions, because I know it's not going to work out.
And then he has to split into 2 people so that one of them can be with...
Exactly, because he's got to move on. Like and Death is in a similar position where he's immortal, he's going to live forever, and he's got to go off and do his job. So he's never going to settle down, and there's not going to be a happy ending. And I thought it was really interesting how Amy, when she was on, described a romance story as one where there's 2 people, and it's not whether or not they're going to get together, but how are they going to get together and have their happy ending.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, if you set up this grand romance and you know it's going to end badly, that's not a romance story anymore.
No,
it's a tragedy. So I don't like that. I don't want that. Just it makes me sad. So I couldn't remember if that was in this book or not, and I was kind of glad for most of the story it didn't feel like it was going that way.
Well, to be honest, I feel like it's not necessarily a romance. I think Death remembers everybody. And when she talks about what was supposed to be her husband...
Rufus,
he goes, oh yes, I remember that person. And it's like, well, this is kind of my fault. I think he feels some responsibility towards her for the way her life is. And I think in some ways towards the end of the book, that's him making it up to her in lots of ways. It's like, this was my job, but I think the longer he's not at the job, the more he feels empathy and the more he feels the darker side of his work.
Like when he's helping out on the farm and he has to help put down rat poison and kill a chicken, and he's never been on that side of death. He's always been after that happened. He's not responsible. He's cleaning up.
Yeah, he's the person who comes and collects them afterwards, not the person who does the deed.
Yeah.
Driving the meat Uber, not running the abattoir.
Yeah, there's that line about how it's the difference between being a thief and stealing by finding something that someone's lost. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay. That's an interesting way to put it. But he takes the job and he starts working on the harvest, initially by cutting each blade of grass one at a time with the scythe.
They're really fast still.
I mean, I think he might have almost chosen that job simply because it was something he already had skills in. He was like, oh, here's a field. This is where they use scythes. I can use a scythe. This is my core competency here. I can do this.
Yeah. And it was kind of necessary for the title of the book, which is a pun on Repo Man, the film.
I mean, it's not like Rocket Man by Elton John.
No. Although it is kind of lonely out in Death's domain. So that does also fit. I really enjoyed those bits of the book where he's just hanging out on the farm and he's, being Bill Dorr and trying to make friends by learning how to be hilariously crap at things instead of really good at them, which is his natural inclination.
Can we just quickly talk about his name? So he sort of sees as this guy, she asks for his name and then he's like, Mr. Sky. She's like, no one's called that. And so he looks at the door and he goes, Mr. Door. And she's like, oh, you got to be like a Bill or a Tom or a Bruce, one of those. He's like, yes. And he just like, she's like, which one? She's like, one of those. And he's like, which one? The first one. So I understand door because he's like at death's door, quite literally. And so like he's death door. But then I was like, halfway through this book, I was like, builder, builder. But what's the meaning of that? Is that intentional that it's supposed to sound like builder? Like he's building a new life, he's building a new personality, or is that just a coincidence?
I sort of thought it was one of those gags where he's going to get a dumb pseudonym in that classic sitcom fashion. Like it's happened to so many characters where they've like suddenly got to make up a different real name and they just sort of start saying things they can see until someone accepts their answer,
but like because the two bits work together, and I was wondering if that's an accident or on purpose.
That's a good question.
Tom Door would be like totally fine as well. Like I think that would just be funny, but Bill Door is also a word.
I don't know. What do you think about it, Sarah?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I kind of was thinking more in enjoying the subtext of Miss Flitworth obviously knowing that she's not getting his real name.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of knowing even who he is to an extent. Kind of instinctually understanding it. So to me, it's like, just you need to pick something. To me, I'm not sure there's any greater significance there.
And she's used to shady men, with her dad being a smuggler and her Rufus being kind of a smuggler as well.
Yeah, she's just like, you need to pick something. It's not necessarily...
Yeah, she's like, I'm fine with you not using a real name, but you got to give me a name because I'm not going to call you mysterious stranger, which is not what she says. But I think that's where she's coming from, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about Builder, but as builder, but I didn't figure that was. I don't think there's significance there.
He doesn't really build anything. He's
Except
mostly
for a life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's
Briefly.
true. He starts having dreams and all of that.
Yeah, that's true.
I do like that he starts to have dreams. I think that's cool.
And I like that he's like, wait, someone came by and stole a bunch of time while I was waiting for sleep to happen.
You're like, no, that's how sleep works.
I was waiting to experience sleep, and suddenly it's 6 hours later.
Yeah, it was interesting how he suddenly became able to do those human things, even though he's still... I mean, there's quite a lot of ambiguity about how he works in that sort of weird in-between time where he's technically not death anymore. He's been laid off, but he's also not ceased to exist.
He's absolutely still a skeleton or skellington, as the
Yeah.
as the little girl likes to say.
Yeah, that was great.
That man's a skeleton.
I've had so many conversations with kids about that kind of stuff in my job where essentially my job is to lie to them about stories, but for fun purposes. And some of them just, instead of buying into it, like, oh yeah, well, I want to believe that's true. They go, is it really true that there's a trapdoor that goes down 100 stories underneath this building? I don't think that's true. It's a lie. Like,
I was
on,
that
kids.
kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those kids are they're lovely. Those kids are lovely. Just in case any of them or their parents are listening, they're lovely.
They'll grow up and do their own holocast or whatnot.
No suspension of disbelief at all.
Yeah.
No suspension of disbelief.
Oh, okay. All right. Pay that. That is happening. But, back in Ankh-Morpork while this is going on,
Life energy is wreaking havoc.
There's weird stuff happening. Screws are unscrewing themselves and flying around the room. Furniture is moving. Clothes are running down the street. And pretty soon it started to affect the palace. And the patrician calls for the wizards to come and have a look and check it out. But not just the wizards. The wizards arrive and find that the priests of the town have already arrived as well because they are also going to be consulted. And they start immediately arguing with each other. And so Arch-Chancellor Ridcully steps aside with the High Priest of Blind Io, who is the leader of the priests of Ankh-Morpork. And they have a bit of a word to each other because they seem to know each other rather well.
Yeah, and I like how the priest is giving a bit of backstory on what the gods have been up to, and it's like a previously on this soap opera kind of vibe.
That was so good. I had a note about this soap opera thing as well. That was so good.
But turns out Ridcully and this person know each other because they are brothers.
Yeah, I thought that was so nice.
It's such a good little kick because it's like it's a normal conversation, and yes, they obviously know each other, but then it's like, oh, we should probably go see Mum.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, like, it just snaps in. And it's like, yeah, siblings.
Yeah. It was, and I think we've all had some kind of conversation like that with our siblings.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
an only child.
Oh, I'm sorry. We can have that conversation later if you like.
No.
It's that feeling of joint responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents are currently overseas, and my brother and I are currently having discussions about making sure that all the plants are alive when they get back.
But speaking of joint responsibility, no one in the meeting is willing to take responsibility for what's going on because it's not magic. It's not sort of the Alchemist Guild blowing things up. It's not any of
gods.
Yeah, no, everyone's at a bit of a loss about it. And Veterinary, to him, it's like, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
Do better.
Yeah,
And
figure out what's going on.
And meanwhile, though, what's on Veterinary's desk? It's a snow globe.
Oh, yes. These have mysteriously turned up in a warehouse in Ankh-Morpork, which just so happens to be owned by one cut-me-own-throat dibbler. And everyone who sees them thinks they're quite beautiful. They're these, when we first are introduced to them, they're not actually described. But eventually we find out they are. They're a snow globe. They're typical kind of half dome with glass with little bits of snowflakes in them. And inside each one is quite a staggeringly impressive replica of some bit of Ankh-Morpork. And on the bottom is written, "Greetings from Ankh-Morpork," but in really messy writing, as if someone was sort of copying letters down without having really seen them before. And he sells all of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, good old CMOT Dibbler. Doesn't he go and ask Colin for legal advice?
Oh,
Yeah.
he does, yeah. Is it okay? Yeah.
It's like, so I didn't put these here, but they're in my spot.
Yeah.
Can I sell them?
Yeah.
And Colin being Colin is like, and Dibbler just takes it and runs with it.
Yeah, and in fact, Colin becomes his first customer.
Yeah, he's like,
That's
oh,
right,
yeah. He just about pockets one, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Wanders
yeah.
off.
There's evidence.
Yes, evidence.
Yeah, and then Dib was like, "Oh, that'll be 5p, please." It's like, oh, what? Oh, okay. Yeah, and they've gotten all over the city, but also they mysteriously disappear at inopportune times, and everyone forgets about them once they bring them home.
Just like real snow globes.
Yeah.
This is something that I really love about Pratchett, that he can make things so strange and so familiar at the same time. It's like, of course, once you bring the snow globe home, you forget about it. You know, you put it in a cupboard, you put it away.
Yeah.
But you can't throw it away because it's a souvenir.
That's right.
Yeah, and probably someone gave it to you. And I thought there was a nice sort of crossover there because later on the farm, Miss Flitworth invites Bill Dorr in to the parlour. Says, "It's cold out there, you know, come in and have a drink. I'll make some scones and stuff." And he's sitting in there and it's just full of stuff from all over the world.
Knickknacks.
Just knickknacks and souvenirs because, you know, her father and her partner were both, well, travelling men, shall we say, euphemistically. And so they brought back stuff from all of the places that they'd been all over the world or sent it back to her. And there's that nice sort of indicator that, you know, this is something that happens on the Discworld anyway, but now it's this sort of weird modern round world version that's intruding in. And it's that, you know, it's that classic Pratchett thing of having something from our world intruding on the Discworld again, but in this time in a really mysterious and sinister way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's handled really, really well, the mystery of it, because at first he won't even tell you that they're snow globes. And then when he does tell you that they're snow globes, he doesn't really tell you why they're snow globes. And it does, like, you can really only make the connections, I feel, once the characters in the book make the connections. I think he purposely leaves out the things that would help you figure it out and leaves it mysterious, which I think is just really impressive as a technique, really.
Yeah, that's true.
And I found out that the cloth draped over the back of a chair to keep it from being dirtied up, it's called a maracasar.
Anti-macassar.
Anti-macassar.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, I looked it up and I was like...
Yeah. You know why it's called that? It's because they used to wear a lot of oil in their wigs and in their hair. And one of the main kinds of oil was macassar oil. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. And so the idea was that this little doily that goes on the back of the chair would save it from being soiled by all of the oils that were in your hair or in your wig.
So oiled.
Yeah. Yeah.
Grief.
And so it gets doiled. It's just very good.
Yeah. So that's what those are all
Wait,
about.
is that why they're called doilies? Because they like absorb oil?
I don't know. Maybe.
Could be. But see, if I was at work having this sort of bizarre conversation, I would say, let's look this up.
It's okay. That's what the show notes are for.
Yes.
There'll be a full explanation, listeners.
Yes.
And if there's not, I'll want to know why.
And if you haven't been reading the show notes, they're actually a very good read. There's like jokes and things in them too.
That's true.
Yeah. But Bill's getting to know I keep wanting to say Flitworth better.
Yes.
And he's also getting to know the townsfolk better. Like he goes down the pub and he's not sure how to make small talk, so he remembers what he's supposed to say, which is, I will buy everyone a drink. And and then he starts playing pool or whatnot, but he accidentally plays it perfectly. Then he realizes he's supposed to get things wrong, so he sort of becomes the group buffoon, putting darts in the wrong thing in someone's hat, landing it in someone's beer, and he's just glad that no one's noticing that it takes actually a lot more skill to mess up so badly.
Yeah. I do like that. I
Yeah.
did really like that line.
And that's when the girl comes out and says that man's a skeleton.
Yeah, that was great. Actually, going into that bit, there's a thing that Pratchett does several times in this book, and it's a technique he's used in other books too, where he does a very cinematic thing where he's shot matching. So he'll say something or describe the shape of something in the end of one section, and then at the start of the next section, he'll describe something that's a similar shape or have the same sort of line. And he does that going into this first bit with Bildor making friends, from the bit where he's talking about the priests and Mrs. Cake. I really enjoyed that. It happens several times in this book, and it's just quite pleasing to the soul.
Now that you've mentioned Mrs. Cake, though,
Oh, yeah.
because she's been sort of, was she alluded to ones before this, or is this all the ones we skipped ahead to? Because
I think Mrs. Cake is referred to in Men at Arms when they look at the post office motto.
yeah, don't ask us about Mrs. Cake.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah, that's right. Which is obviously not the same Mrs. Cake, because that motto is very, very ancient. But yeah, it's I
Must
like
run
that.
in the family.
Yeah, I think
Mrs.
so.
Cakeness must run in the family.
Yeah, the ancient Mrs. Cake is just
Once in future Mrs. Cake.
But I mean, Mrs. Cake, she's quite a character. I mean, how do we feel about Mrs. How would we describe Mrs. Cake?
She's one of those terrifying, wonderful old women.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't really love the way she interacts with Ludmilla.
She's bad with Ludmilla.
That's
yeah,
true.
she's like it's that slightly mum/grandma thing of not recognizing that the child's okay with being a wolf. She's okay, and she's like, I can pick up the teacup, Mum. And it's like, no, you'll explode it. Don't do that.
Yeah, like very overprotective.
Yeah, it's not that there's not love there. There's just this doesn't quite believe in her.
It's too paternalistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, get away from the curtains. The neighbours might see you. Like, there's a bit of shame, but not quite. But not.
I think she even says it at one point. She goes, "She's my shame." I think at one point she even says that.
Yeah, and then there's the Ludmilla's like, yeah, that's all right. Like, she just sort of takes it good-humouredly, I think it's kind of described as. And it's like, oh, that's a bit rough.
Yeah.
Because I would have hoped that it'd been like, she's not ashamed of her. She's worried that other people will treat her badly. But yeah, you're right.
And I guess, I guess the only thing is, I'm not sure that she necessarily means that she's ashamed of her. I think she's like, I know I'm supposed to be ashamed of her because she's not what you would expect in a daughter. You know?
Yeah. But I mean, and you'd think that she'd be rather more broad-minded because she's a medium. She speaks to the dead all the time, and she's the terror of all of the religions in Ankh-Morpork because she just rubs them the wrong way, because talking to people after they're dead kind of defeats the purpose of telling people something good or bad will happen to them according whether they sort of follow your religion. So there's an interesting tension there.
I think it's also because she like turns up and destroys their churches, like not on purpose. She turns up and she'll start coming to the services, and she'll start being the person who brings the cake and prepares the readings and all the other
all
stuff.
the flowers and
yeah, and then she falls out with the priest or the priestess or whoever. No, she doesn't hang out with the priestesses, does she?
no, she doesn't like priestesses.
That
She's
was-
a bit not
yeah.
women.
No.
She's a bit old-fashioned.
She basically
in a bad
becomes
way.
a pillar of the community, and then when she doesn't like the community anymore, she withdraws that pillar, and then the building collapses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they all sort of live in terror that she's going to turn up one day, make their church run wonderfully efficiently, have an argument and leave.
Yeah.
And like what you were saying before about how it's odd that she treats Ludmilla this way despite her own sort of precognition powers, I think that's because Mrs. Cake is the kind of person who sees her experience as the universal experience. What she is normal. Everyone else not having precognition is weird. So therefore, she doesn't see it as something.
She can't quite get outside herself. There's just, in Mrs. Cake's head, there is only Mrs. Cake.
And maybe a tiny bit of room for one man bucket, her supposed spirit guide.
Yeah.
Who's a weird kind of.
Oh dear, he's a problem, isn't he?
He's a yeah. I don't know how do we feel about One Man Bucket? I mean, his name is that classic joke about being named after the first thing your mother saw, and that is an old joke. Like this is probably the first time I would have encountered it. He says, "Yeah, I feel sorry for my twin brother. Oh, he's two dogs fighting." He said, two dogs fighting. We'd love to be called two dogs fighting. Hey, you're like, okay, all right, we get the joke. But
two dogs playing poker.
Yeah. You just made all the cards soggy now.
Ew.
But yeah.
Oh no, because of the bucket of water.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
That's where I went.
Oh God,
Elizabeth.
Hey, I wasn't the one that said, "Oh no."
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Oh dear.
But yeah, she communicates with the spirit worlds and talks to her spirit guide, and he informs her that there's just loads of spirits there,
and they're all saying crap like, feed the cat, and just, there's a bit of money up the chimney. He's like, oh yeah, people don't normally bother with this rubbish. It's sort of like, she's waiting for you and it's nice here.
Yeah,
because these aren't people with unresolved business. They're people who haven't been, the bus hasn't shown up.
Yeah, it's tell my daughter-in-law she's not allowed to have the good linens and stuff. It's like,
yeah. And so she knows what's going on. There's too much life energy around, and people aren't dying, and it's causing this build-up. And she goes to say, she's got to tell somebody, and she realizes probably I need to tell the wizards. We'll go tell them. They ignore her because she turns up and they don't know who she is. But they very soon afterwards decide to perform the Rite of Ashkente, the most commonly performed bit of magic in all the Discworld books.
It's like their favourite thing to do.
And they always complain about doing it, and they always talk about how they can do it more efficiently with like just 10 cc's of mouse blood. And in this book, someone goes, "Oh, you don't even need that. You can do it with a fresh egg." And yeah,
and they give a nod to that thing you said in a previous episode where they finally cottoned on to, they just think he stands in the circle for the look of the thing.
Yeah.
Because that time that he was just outside being like, what are we waiting for?
He's playing a prank on. That was great. But Death does not show up. Instead, one of the auditors shows up. And Rid Kelly tries to ask it some questions, and it basically says, look, there's been a bit of a disruption. Normal services will resume soon. And it was like getting a message when you try to call Centrelink or something.
Yeah,
it's
you
quite
just
depressing.
get the little robo cue.
Yeah. But
Your call is important to us.
Yeah. And they don't figure out what's going on because of what they're told by the auditor. They sort of put two and two together after realizing that there isn't a death to be contacted right now. So they're like, hang on, if there's no death, then what's happening to all the people who die? And where's all the life energy got? Wait a minute. That's where all this life energy is coming from. And they kind of figure it out.
But let's not worry about that. Let's just get concerned about the shopping trolleys that they're showing up everywhere. I know it's connected, but this is where we were talking about before. It seems like it splits into two books. And I saw a discarded one on my way here, and I was kind of like, oh no.
It's a bit, yeah, you know what, if they made it into a film particularly or a TV show, it would do for shopping trolleys what that episode of Doctor Who Blink did for statues. Like, it'd be like, oh, they're creepy and they're everywhere.
Or what the movie Hereditary's done to having family members.
Oh, really? Oh, no. I don't think I should watch that. I have family members. Well, One Man Bucket's got an idea about them later on, but Windle is he goes back to his room. He's like, I'm going to need some money and stuff, my diary and things. So he digs up his floorboard secret compartment, but he finds some of these snow globes in there. Then he finds a few little bits of broken glass, and he finds this sort of weird wheel. He's like, I don't know what this is. And then the trolleys start showing up all over the shop.
And the gardener is very pleased about it initially, like the dwarf gardener.
Modo, the gardener.
Yeah, he's great. I enjoy him.
And he, almost as much as he enjoys compost.
Yeah, there's this deep world weariness to him. He isn't even all that bothered when his lawn gets destroyed. He's like, yep, this is how things go. This is where I work. I'll just, add more stuff to the compost pile, go to my happy place.
And he's really into it in this book. He's like, oh, you see a lot of interesting things in this job this time around.
Because he used to work in the palace and it wasn't as interesting. We should probably have a fresh start. So maybe we should talk about the Fresh Start Club.
What a good idea. Because while all this this trolley business is going on, Windle has gone off to a meeting of the Fresh Start Club, which turns out to be organised by one Mr. Reginald Shue.
Red Shue.
Yeah, what a good working class name that is. Good old Reg. He chooses a lot of the normal sounding names just for the associations we have with them. And so Red Shue is called Reg because it just sounds like someone that you trust to run the local bowls club or something.
Yeah, he's who you expect to find in a small English town quietly running a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Like Reg from the Bill.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Who got horribly bullied, I realise the older I get.
Yes.
I mean, I think, in our childhoods there was the bill and it was just the bill. And now, you're older and you go, ooh, the bill's actually a lot more complex than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Especially when it went from like the 20-minute episodes that were self-contained to like the full-on soap opera. Welcome to our podcast spin-off, The Bill.
Now, there must be a podcast about the bill. That's going in the show notes.
Is this one? Bill Dorr.
There's thousands of episodes of The Bill. If there's not a podcast, someone somewhere is doing something wrong.
The people in the Fresh Start Club are quite
my favourite.
I love
quite a bunch,
them.
aren't they? Let's run through them. We've got
Arthur and Doreen Wilkins. I mean,
the Count and Countess not far outo. Not far outo.
Arthur.
Yeah, Arthur. I couldn't quite get her. I was trying to figure out what her accent should sound like, and I kind of could see. I think he did such a good job of writing it in such a way that you can see what she's trying to get at, but it doesn't quite work.
Yes.
turns out she's not a vampire at all. She's just taking an interest in her husband's hobbies.
Yeah.
I love that they've got to build a moat. And that rather than the plaster ducks, there's plaster bats.
Yeah.
I can I can really picture their living room. It's like very English kitsch, but everything's bats.
I kind of imagine them like from Keeping Up Appearances, like Hyacinth and Richard Bouquet or Bucket, and it's kind of like if Richard had been bitten by a vampire, this is exactly how it would have gone down.
Yes, absolutely. Now I'm going to picture them as those actors as well.
And, she'd be wearing the little scarf tied around her neck, only it would have, I don't know, little drawings of blood droplets or something on it. It wouldn't, she would have that same very sweet face of, I am getting things done.
So like she is described like quite Patricia Routledge-ish. Like she looks to like a classic English lady, but she's trying to look like a Transylvanian like vampiress. And it just doesn't quite work because she's got like the short hair, but she's trying to make it look long. It's just great.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's so good.
All of the Fresh Start are just so well written and so individual.
I want them to have 10 books to themselves. Like,
yeah. I think it's very easy when you create like a group of people like that to make them all sound the same, particularly when they're all supposed to be in the same club. When I think, there's so many distinct personalities there and that you could have 10 books about just about all of them.
So that's Mr. Ixolite?
Mr. Ixolite, yeah.
The socially anxious, only banshee left in the world that is sort of screaming on a rooftop, sort of sheepishly shoves a note that says, ooh, you, underneath the door.
And I love that that's part of the cover of your edition of the book, Liz. The other ones that get a bit of screen time, so to speak, are obviously Reg, but also Schleppel, the bogeyman, who nobody's quite sure what he looks like because he's sort of under a chair. You can't see him. Lupine, who, I mean, he's recycling a name there. Like, Lupine Wants is the name of the villain in Guards. So it's like, didn't we just use this a few books ago?
Maybe it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up.
Yeah, and I guess if you are a wolf who turns into a wolf man, you don't have a human name, so you might as well pick something that means wolf.
Yeah. Do we think he's a were-man? Is he a wolf?
He'd have to be a wolf-were.
Wolf-were?
Wolf-were. That's what they're called in Dungeons and Dragons, yeah.
Okay.
Wolf-weres. Because were is an old word for man.
Okay.
So werewolf just means man-wolf. Right. And a wolf-were is then a wolf man.
Like a reverse one.
Yeah, a reverse one.
Incidentally, werewolf backwards is actually flower ooh.
I like that concept. And there's that whole sort of, him and Ludmilla. We didn't say what Ludmilla's deal was, Mrs. Cake's daughter, but she is also a person who turns into a wolf person.
Yeah.
But she's from the human side. Although it's all a bit of a mystery. They're not quite sure why, because she'd never been bitten by one. And she was pretty sure that Mr. Cake, God rest his soul, was not one either. But it might be a genetic throwback or something.
Yeah, it was an uncle back.
There was a talk of a relative. To be honest, I get the feeling that Mrs. Cake knows exactly how Ludmilla is Ludmilla.
Oh, right.
And it just, like, it's that she's my shame thing again. It's like, that's not to talk about it, dear.
Oh, okay.
So like maybe it's the milkman's a werewolf.
Yes.
Oh, dear. Okay.
Yes.
But there's a couple of members who never really get mentioned again, because there's Droll, the ghoul, where Lupine's giving Wendell the advice. He's like, she offers you a pie, don't eat it. He's like, why? Is she cooking human remains? He's like, no, she's just not a very good cook, which I thought was hilarious. And there's Mr. Gorper, which I don't know if he's really explained, but he's in there somewhere.
He just disappeared completely from my memory.
Yeah, well, because he's mentioned and then he sort of never gets mentioned again. I don't think it's even said what kind of undead person he is.
But then they just like choose the key players from that meeting and just take them off on a research adventure to the library, which is always more exciting in the Discworld. Well, no, going to the library in real world is also very exciting. I take that back.
That's true. I mean, it's...
That said, there's no orangutan in our local library, is there? That's kind of
that
sad.
we know of.
I really got to go have a better look.
Yeah.
Maybe there was an orangutan in the library who was accidentally turned into a librarian by means of a magical accident, and now they're a human librarian. But yeah, he decides to figure out what's going on, because he also goes to see Mrs. Cake.
They sort of have a Wizard of Oz thing where they keep picking up people along the way on the road to Mrs. Cake.
Yeah.
And then like this ragtag group of misfits shows up at Mrs. Cake's house. They have a bit of a chat. They do a seance kind of thing. They find out what's going on, and then they head to the library.
Well, this all happens after Miss Flitworth figures out what Death's deal is.
And he's getting all sort of emo about his mortality.
And then it all comes to a head when there's a fire in the town near Miss Flitworth's farm.
And here's where I'd like to share a theory that is ridiculous and definitely not intentional. There's kind of like a Doors theme in this book, because like he's Mr. As in the Doors, the band.
Yeah, I
because it's like Mr. Door like is death, and then there is later on the bogeyman gets given his own door to hide behind so he can move through the world.
True.
And then like just after Bill Dorr is accepted by the community, there's a fire. As in like, come on baby, light my.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes you listen to music while you're writing, and sometimes it gets into your subconscious. So I'm not going to overtly say anything, but you know. And speaking of doors, the inn no longer has one because it's on fire, and everyone is out except for the little girl who has spotted that this guy is not a guy, he's a skeleton.
That's right.
But he doesn't want to mess with things because Death has a plan.
And he knows that meddling with the fate of one person can destroy the world, as previously explored in the book Mort.
Yeah.
And as you remember, Mort, the person sucks. From our earlier podcast.
Is that the important part that we need to remember?
But I think Death comes at it from this is how it's supposed to go. And then Miss Flitworth looks at him and is like, this is not how we be people.
Yeah. Oh, she doesn't just look at him. She gives him a slap across the face.
Oh, yes, of course she does.
Yeah.
That must have hurt her hand.
Yeah, because
How did she even reach him? I picture her as this incredibly tiny person, him being incredibly tall. How did she even reach his face to slap it?
anime Matrix moments where like freezes and then like all the shooting forward like with the fly kick with the hands.
Yeah.
And there's also people talking about, is it the rum barrels that are starting to bubble up? So there's like the threat of explosion, like every sort of fire storyline.
And there's that thing where it says, you know, the thing about rum is that it doesn't boil for very long. And it explodes. And then, you know, Bill Dorr comes out of the fire, and it kind of it sort of cuts past a lot of the action there, and it's kind of assumed, but it cuts to him taking her into the bedroom at Miss Flitworth's place and laying her down on the bed, saying, "Oh, she's going to be all right, but don't let anybody take anything out of this room, and I don't want any witches, and I don't want any wizards, there's no magic." And he's very insistent about that, and that incident is what makes her realize what's going on with him. She's like, "I knew I recognized you." Right. And he says, you know, I'm going to die. And also he says, I've been given the very poorly written note of the Banshee, because Mr. X-Light gives him a note, and he's like, oh, okay. And when he's trying to explain who's fired him, that's when she like sort of goes, oh, it's like the revenuers. Yeah, I knew, we all thought you had something to do with taxes. And he's like, no, not taxes. The other one.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know if you've seen the film Meet Joe Black, about Death deciding to take a bit of a holiday and go down to Earth and inhabit the body of someone who's just died. So
Who happens to be Brad Pitt.
Just happens to be Brad Pitt.
Solid choice.
Yeah. There's also a thing in that where everyone assumes he's like works in taxation, because he knows like, no, I'm the other one. You know, that's his sort of thing.
It's kind of like a late 90s thing, like that, City of Angels. Like there was a bit of sort of, what if the Immortals came down and did the thing?
Yeah.
I also always get Meet Joe Black confused with Mighty Joe Young, which came out at around the same.
Isn't there an ape in that?
Yes. There's an ape in this too. So, you know, maybe it's like the crossover we didn't know we wanted.
They are not at all the same thing, thankfully. He tells her what's going on, and she's like, auditors, we hate them around here. No, why didn't you say so? Well, I'll help you fight them. Let's do something about it. He's like, oh, do you think I should? He says, yeah. And he's like, all right, then I will.
And then he goes to sharpen his scythe on literally anything that's available.
One of the reasons that Death decides he's going to fight back is that he's stopped the girl from dying by sharing what's left of his life with her.
She's living on borrowed time.
Yeah. And there's this great line where Miss Flitworth says, I didn't know people could give people some of their life. And Dad says, it happens all the time. And it was one of those lines where it means something so deep and Pratchett, what are you doing?
I know, this is what I actually really love about Pratchett, that he's making the jokes and the bizarre and the wondrous, and then he'll hit you right in the core humanity, basically, and just go, this is what life is about. This is what people are about. And it's an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
As a fantasist.
Yeah.
As a writer at all.
Yeah, he knows what it's about. So he decides he's gonna try and do something about it and try and sharpen up a scythe. While he's doing his preparations, this is where Windle goes to meet Mrs. Cake, and they have another chat with One Man Bucket, who tells them what he thinks is going on. The little snow globes are city eggs, and that they're hatching out into a mobile intermediate sort of larval form, but then they'll become cities. And Windle's like, oh, okay, well, that's weird, but I guess that kind of makes sense. And this is the main connection between the two storylines that are going on. The reason for the trolley life forms to show up is that there is this extra abundance of life energy because there's no death to take it away. How do we feel about that connection? Is it a strong connection? Is it satisfying?
I enjoyed both storylines, but I feel like they could have been very easily separated into different books. But then you'd have to have something to bulk out the other one. But I'd be very happy to see Death go and do some more town things, like sort of go to the local fair.
Get Binky reshooed, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do love that bit early on in the book where Miss Flitworth remarks, it's like he's never seen grass before about Binky, and it's like, oh, Binky's happy. I like that.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
I enjoyed them both, but if anything, I felt like the trolley one didn't need any more space. Like, I felt like we got everything we needed to know about that, except a really satisfying explanation of where it came from. Like the idea that there was just life energy, and so it just happened. Because all the other things that happen are things that were already there, being animated by extra life energy. They weren't something that sort of was spontaneously created. And I was like, well, I wanted a bit more about where did that come from? How did that work? But the thing for me was that there was so much of the trolley storyline that I just felt it was taking a space away from the death storyline.
You want to go back to that nice peaceful place where they're just doing people things.
Yeah. And I'd completely forgotten about the shopping trolleys.
Me too.
When I came back to it, because it's not in the blurb, it's not on the cover of the book, it's not the thing that Reaper Man suggests to you.
And we could still have had Windle and the Misfits without the shopping trolleys.
Yeah.
I love that.
They still could have been involved, and it could have been something more about, I don't know, it could have been something else. I have such mixed feelings about it because I also love it. Like, I love the weirdness of it.
It's like, I look at this and it's like, it was published in 91, right? And my main memory of 90s shopping centres, to spoil things a little bit, is what you get at the final stage of your city egg. It's a mall. It's a big beige mall. And it's like, that's what they all looked like when we were kids and teenagers. And I feel like that maybe it was just something that was on his mind almost at the time, that it was like this sudden springing up of big beige 90s shopping malls.
And I think it would have been,
as an infection.
Yeah, well, I think because they'd been around in America for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I think that probably the 90s is where you started to see these things cropping up in the UK and Australia, more so, and sort of supplanting the older style kind of shopping centres.
And it's in truckers as well. Like, it's a thing he's clearly thought about to work across two books.
Yeah, because the old school department store closing down to be replaced by a shopping mall.
Shopping malls are terrible places. They're just the worst beigey blandness. But there's also like this strange appeal. Like, because as we jump to later, there's the music. They all start hearing the music, and except for the Fresh Start Club, who are sort of like checking it out because they're like, something's wrong. Everyone else is kind of drawn to it, kind of like Morris and his trained rodents pretended to be, but actually like it's a siren call of banal sales.
Yeah.
Like it's actively mentioned as a parasitical form of life, drawing people off the normal life of the city.
Yeah, and that's certainly how they work in the States. Like, they built them away from places. And there's a great episode of 99% Invisible, which is a podcast about design, which I'll link to in the show notes because I think it's very pertinent here. And it talks about that sort of the Gruen transfer effect and all that sort of thing, where they were designed to make people buy things, but also to make them feel comfortable in these places. They were supposed to be a community space as well, But then that kind of got perverted by the way that they were set up, and they were built away from city centres and away from population centres, which
They're
meant
designed
people,
to keep you there.
Yeah, well, people had to drive to them, and then there was nothing else to do while you were there because you were stuck there until you got back in your car to drive all the way home.
And there's the feeling in the book as well, like that they kill community because they talk about like the city dying once it's drawn out. When I was in Ireland, a man that I met was telling me that Lidl, which is a chain there, their strategy to become the dominant store in Ireland would be to go to a town, build a Lidl at each end of the main strip so that it was convenient to go to one of the two Lidls rather than the corner store in between. And when that store eventually closed, then they'd close one of the Lidls.
Right.
It's like, which is kind of like what a parasite or like a invading force would do. Like it's just starve out the people there and then
Yeah, that's creepy.
chill out.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this is making me think of IKEA, to be honest. Because if you really look at an IKEA, that is designed for you to walk in one end and to take a very long time to get out. They want you to be hungry by the time you get to the food hall, and then they want you to be ready to buy things by the time you get to the hall with the actual stuff in it. It's that sort of sense of that a shopping mall is designed to get you in and keep you there.
Yeah.
What would an IKEA egg look like? Because it wouldn't be a snow globe. Like,
I think it'd be a small plush toy, maybe.
I'm kind of picturing like millions of little wooden dowels that hold the,
Or a tiny lamp, maybe.
yeah, like pouring. You just pour them everywhere, and maybe half of them wouldn't survive. But like maggots, but dowels.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
I think maybe it'd be like one of those charming toys you get at a Christmas market, where it's like a wooden man with all bendy joints.
Yeah.
And he's standing on a round thing, and underneath it, you press a button. And that actually makes all the strings holding him up loosen
yes.
and he falls to one side. You
Yeah,
let go, he
I
comes
used to
back
have
up.
Those, yeah.
Yeah,
And they're really fun for like an hour and then you put it in the drawer.
You forget about it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
no. It's going to transform into... What would be the
I think
intermediate
IKEA
stage?
even sell those.
Oh, yeah. What would the intermediate
Oh,
stage?
it has to be a Billy bookcase.
Yes.
Yes. They're
Oh, God.
everywhere.
My house is in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. It's infested.
You're
Yes.
just going to wake up and you'll be in IKEA.
There's at least one in this room right now.
Yeah. Oh, God.
I have two in my house. Yeah.
We're all going to die. Well, look, but let's bring it back a little
Sorry,
bit.
let me say Dikea. Okay. Okay. And now let's go back to the book.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to say was that this is also the part of the book that goes back to that point I was making before, where the parasitical shopping mall life form comes out of nowhere. Like it spontaneously creates in that cellar. Whereas the other things that are infused with the extra life energy are things that are kind of already there.
Like pants.
Like the pants that fly down the street, like the furniture. Oh yeah, where the Red Cullies are talking about. Did you see the label? Like it's $7 and got an extra pair of trousers. So good. But also there's the curses, Red Cully's curses. That whenever he curses, because he's also magical because he's a wizard. But the life force, brings them into like existence, which is great.
So he has like all the jolly swears that aren't quite swears, like when he goes dang it or darn it all to heck.
Yeah. And he actually says poot, which is like my brother used to say, and he was a big Pratchett reader. And now I'm wondering if this is where he got it from or whether he got it from somewhere else. But there's that, and there's also the compost heaps, Moto's compost heaps, which he's been feeding all kinds of weird stuff, but then they come to life, or one of them does anyway. And tries to eat its way into the university, and the wizards eventually blow it. Well, Red Cully blows it up with his wow sauce, which turns out is a real thing. And in I think it's in Nanny Ogg's cookbook, there's a recipe based on the original wow sauce, which was like a condiment from the 1800s. I don't know if it's anything like the one described in the book. Probably, hopefully not, or you'll be in trouble.
Well, I think, I mean, if you had a bottle of it, you would try and find a compost heap and see if you could blow it up, wouldn't you?
Well, I ate Tabasco directly, so like actually his tray of condiments sounded very appealing to me.
Yeah.
Are
you an auto condimenter?
It's just oh dear. No, I was going to say no comment, no condiment. No
condiments.
But
I had a note in my notes about this section of the book which just says Rid Cully's sick burn, which is where they're talking about the compost, and they go, I don't know if it is that dangerous. All it's doing is like moving around slowly, eating things. And Rid Cully goes, put a pointy hat on it and be a bloody faculty member. Yes, nice burn. So true, so true.
So the wizards are all sort of forced into action to try and take down all the living things. Meanwhile, death doesn't have a replacement replacement yet, but other things do. He's kind of split into
yeah.
a whole bunch of different deaths. So there's like one, like there's the one we mentioned earlier, like the death for trees, which is just the sound of axes.
Yeah.
What else was there?
The death of mayflies.
which is
turns
like a giant black scaled trout. Yeah. That was great. There's a whole bunch of them described, and they're all trying to figure out what form they should take, because normally they don't need a separate form because they're just sort of part of Death's operations. Which is, I liked that because it sort of explained why when Death takes a holiday, like all the animals don't stop dying as well. Like it's just the humans, because they're more sophisticated idea of death. There's that line where it's like the difference between off the peg and bespoke. It's like animals have a very sort of simple understanding of death, so creating a death for them is quite easy, whereas humans have this very complicated relationship with the idea and all these interesting beliefs about it. So making a new death for them is rather more complicated, and you have to do it by hand, so to speak.
But then the Grim Squeaker is a bit more complicated because it takes a few forms before you get to it right. Like, he starts off as like, what, cheese? Like, why would death be... I mean, yeah.
Well, the cheese in a mousetrap, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also just cheese if you're lactose intolerant.
Imagine being a lactose intolerant mouse. I mean, that would be fine for most mice because most mice don't eat any cheese, but still, you'd be disappointed, wouldn't you?
Can't bear it.
Oh, dear.
Oh, no.
Unbelievable.
Look, you're making me feel blue.
It's a damn shame.
I can't keep up with all these cheese puns.
That was subtle. But yeah, that's where we do get the death of rats shows up, and he's
Grim Squeaker.
Well, he's it's such a good name, and he's around when the fire happens because he runs into the fire to take the lives of. There's that one scene where it's basically like a death cameo in any other Discworld book, but it's the Grim Squeaker talking to a rat who's died in the explosion and just sort of explaining to him that he's dead, and it's exactly like a cameo that Death would make in any other Death book. I love that so much. But yeah, he's been sharpening his scythe though. He's been sharpening on increasingly like soft and more subtle things, including silk and cobwebs, and eventually he sharpens it on the sunlight coming over the mountains. But then that's not enough. That's not enough to complete the plan. He takes it to the blacksmith and asks him to destroy it. It must be destroyed by midnight.
He asks him to kill it.
Yeah, to kill it. He's got to kill it. And the blacksmith's like, okay, sure. But also the blacksmith's a bit distracted because he's building something very, very complicated, gears and pistons and levers.
3/8 scriptly, very important.
So otherwise, they're...
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want it to be shearing off in the camshaft,
I think.
With disastrous results.
Yes.
None of us are very... sort of mechanically inclined people.
I think we covered that quite smoothly.
Yeah.
No one will detect.
I've got, vague concepts that I've inherited from my father, but it's like, I think I understand what a camshaft is, I think. But really in my brain, it's just like, basically, if this, all go wrong. All go wrong.
Yeah, don't break this. This is the important bit.
Yeah, this is the bit that stops it from becoming a murder machine.
And I vaguely know what a combine harvester looks like, but it didn't stop me from imagining it and all scenes it was involved in as basically the machine that Maurice builds in Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, that's totally also what I picture.
With the axe that's supposed to chop wood and stuff, and then when it goes all over the field, I was like,
Right.
Well, I think because it also spends a certain amount of time sitting on a hillside under thunder and the lightning.
Yeah, and it's sort of alive, and it's so
yeah, it's kind of creepy.
And when they first try it out, there's that scene where it's like Paul Bunyan. It's death going up against the new machine, newfangled thing that's going to take away people's jobs, and it's like cutting up the what's reaping the harvest on one side of the fence, and then Death's doing it by hand with his scythe on the other side, going as fast as he can, presumably still taking
one at a time,
but doing it almost as fast as the other one, not quite making it. But he's now human enough that he gets tired out by this effort and nearly collapses. So it's quite, it's that sort of tragic, oh no, I'm not good enough for the future. And it's a really nice illusion because they feel like they're being replaced. And of course, Death is being replaced by this much more sinister figure. And he mistakes the combination harvester on the hill for the new Death. He thinks that's what it is.
Oh, it's also metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, I do really actually love all the men of the village who are also doing the harvesting, because it's like, you've met these people 100 times in a British whatever, pretty much.
Yeah.
There was a line actually that I marked down. William Spigot was the one that sang when he worked, breaking into that long nasal whine, which meant that folk song was about to be perpetrated. I really love that. It's
Yeah. Pratchett really does have a lot of disdain for folk music, which, considering that he's created quite a bit of it, either deliberately or inadvertently, is a bit ironic. But yeah.
And also exclamation marks, which again get a bollocking in in the description later.
Yeah, sign of an unsound mind.
Mm-hmm.
The combination harvester is not the new Death, although Death does steal its tarpaulin to save the harvest when the storm comes on. And I love the way that they talk about, there's that callback to Miss Flitworth's story about what happened to her fiance, how he had to go off on a business trip and he was supposed to return the day before they were going to get married, but he didn't make it, presumably because he died, although some people tried to tell her that he'd run off. And she was like, it's drama. It's like living in a book. It shouldn't have to be like that. And then at this part of the story, Death's like, of course he's going to come at midnight, because why would he? He's the sort of person who wouldn't come at any other time if he can show up at midnight.
Yeah. Oh, drama.
Yeah. And he's got a skeletal horse with like electricity.
Which has already been discussed as this is not practical.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why Binky is Binky.
Yeah. And when he does finally show up, one of the things that I did not remember about this book, I remembered that the new Death was quite a significant figure, but he's really like, I mean, you'd be lucky if he's in it for like 4 pages. You know, like he turns up.
He comes to collect.
And then Death runs for the scythe that should have been killed so he can now hang on to it, even though he's in the realm of the dead, but it's not been killed because the blacksmith can't bring himself to destroy something that's so sharp.
This is kind of an interesting concept of the book, like earlier where one man bucket wants a drink, and so she lights it on fire. The ever since slight death of a stiff drink, and he gets the stiff drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the vase to calm everyone down, like by smashing it.
Goes to the vase, goes to the world, to the, let's just say netherworld.
Yeah.
And he can hit people with it.
Yeah, which is great. And that's what he's trying to do with the scythe as well.
Yeah, to create a ghost of it he can handle.
Yeah, but it's not there because he didn't get destroyed. And so he's without a weapon and he has to get just one of the regular scythes when they get back to the barn. But he's so angry that his scythe becomes sharp enough to destroy the new Death. And it really just happens, like they don't even have, I was expecting like a sort of lightsaber kind of Darth Vader showdown. And you get a little bit of the flavor of that because there is a bit where one of the things that they're waving around is described a bit that way. But also when he does cut down the new Death, he just becomes like a pile of robes.
Because he's got a crown. That's the bit that makes him really angry. He's like, Death doesn't wear a crown.
Yeah, and he's got no face. He's just like a bit of smoke and a crown.
Yeah.
Under the cowl. And he's not even a skeleton. Like you don't really figure out what he looks like exactly.
He doesn't have quotation marks, but he also doesn't have a font.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's just, it's almost like in reimagining Death, the humanity has created a darker version, a less positive version. Whereas I think the Death we know and love has built up over so long and has, you know, been in so many situations where Death was welcomed or okay, and it's like he's Death as this is part of life. Whereas I think the new Death is Death as the monster, as the darkness. That's why it like poses on hilltops and waits for the lightning to strike and turns up at midnight, because it's like Death as nightmare rather than Death as
just another thing.
Just another thing, yeah.
You would never describe this new Death as the friend to the old, you know?
No.
This is the Death that would hit on you in an Uber and then call you afterwards from the number he got through Uber.
Oh, yeah.
Ew.
What a jerk.
To just go back to your original Uber analogy, it's just Death, the one we know and love, leads people through the next stage kindly, whereas this one would probably take great joy in making it as terrifying as possible.
And like purposely will take them along with their beliefs. He not only takes you home in some ways, he takes you home in a way that's going to make you feel okay about this. Yeah. And that's not new Death at all.
No. What is it saying about humanity that we can come up with that version of Death? Although it's not quite clear. The auditors talk about it like they're going to fill the position with an applicant. And you know, that in fact they explicitly say that. And so that makes it a bit ambiguous as to whether the human Death really is being sort of called forth from the unconscious of humans, or whether there's a whole bunch of versions of Death sort of waiting in the sidelines going, I want to be Death.
Well, I don't know. It makes me think of Hogfather, where it's sort of pointing out that sort of the base level of the Hogfather, and I guess by extension Santa Claus, is something that starts with blood and with darkness. And maybe the death that we know was like the new death at the start, you know? Maybe like this is millions of years of honing and balancing and shaping by experience and by humanity's changing interpretation of death.
And maybe he'd chill like once the animal bits like came back to him as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it is a very human death. It's not anyone else's death.
Yeah.
Yeah, an animal would be much more likely to just say death is part of life. I mean, the mayflies are quite okay with their dark and scary trout. I'm not sure I would be, but they seem okay with it. And it's like, maybe you're right that there's an imbalance there, because the animal part, the part that says it's okay to die, isn't there. It's just the, oh God, I'm going to die one day, death.
He needs those, because like, yeah, the previous one is like all bits of the same thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Now, look, I have missed out a crucial part of that showdown is that while it is very short, the reason that Death has enough time to fight back against the new Death
This is wonderful.
is that his time doesn't run out. And the new Death sort of looks at the hourglass and is like, hang on a minute. And then Miss Flitworth is behind them holding her own life timer and having given some of her life to Death because Death said that it wasn't very difficult. And so she just sort of concentrated and figured out somehow, out of her desperation, managed to do it and give Death a bit of her time. And so he uses that time to pick up the other scythe and utterly destroy the new Death. And he really is only in it for about 5 pages and then he's gone.
But he does say for you, as in like because he's shocked that a human would give some of their time for Death.
And actually, to come back to your Uber metaphor, I think one of the interesting things is that the auditors really are it's like they don't look at the customer ratings because the customer ratings are going to be very, very low for new Death, but Death himself has probably got a bit of a range, but he's probably averaging above 4. He's okay. He's going to keep his job. But they're not interested in that. They're only interested in KPIs. It's like, how efficient are you? How many souls are you reaping per hour, you know?
They've done the performance review and it's like, he's inefficient.
Yeah.
He's inefficient. He's not right.
And we've all had bosses like that.
Yeah.
Particularly when you've been in those sort of soul-destroying jobs where that's all the people above you care about. They're not caring about, are you doing a good job? They're just like, are you doing a job that's by the numbers better than the job that you could have been doing? And you're like, oh, yeah. A lot of call center jobs are like that.
Well, captioning is in some, not in my personal company, but in some companies it's actually charged by how much you can produce.
Oh no!
In a period of time, how many minutes of content, and to sort of put that in perspective, a well-practiced captioner will take 4 hours to cover an entire episode of something like Home and Away.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Uncool.
Well, like I said, my particular company does not run like that, but it is not uncommon in the captioning industry. So I certainly get the idea of productivity ratio. Go, go, go. Account for all your time.
Yeah.
So can we blitz through the shopping mall stuff like quite quickly because I feel like
so.
We've had a good chat about shopping malls.
And it's not the strongest part.
No.
I do enjoy all the allusions to aliens with the wizards like plowing in as the trolleys all sort of zoom out of the city and they're just trying to blow them all up with their staves and shooting magic. And the Dean in particular, who is the one who's described as the biggest, like fattest wizard, but he's also the one who's like, yeah, I'm gonna take my hat off and tie a bit of strip of cloth around my forehead, like I'm
they're
in
bonsai
Rocky.
warriors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they talk about Bush Ido, and you're like, that's not how it's pronounced, guys.
Oh dear.
It's very silly.
It's basically the joy of that section is just reading it. It's the character dialogue. It's just the interactions between the Fresh Start Club. Like,
you enjoy the people.
Yeah.
Not necessarily what's happening around them.
Yeah, exactly. Because Windle and Lupine and Ludmilla end up there, but also the other members of the Fresh Start Club, because they can all hear this noise that the shopping mall is making to attract people, but it doesn't affect them in quite the same way because they're dead. And so they go to find out what it is. All the other people are just sort of standing around, staring at it, waiting for it to be finished so they can go in.
And even the wizards have sort of been recruited into security. Well,
yeah, because they were there when it was being built and they've been sort of brainwashed. And I think it's just so delightfully gross and weird. Like it's that thing where
the
stickiness,
the viscous escalator. It's like
the best bit for me,
the wetness inside.
Oh, it was gross. But the revelation that they're all trying to figure out. Oh, okay, so there's these silver trolleys still in here, and then there's these gold ones with spikes on them, which are like the warriors instead of the worker drones. But then what's making the music? Where's it coming from? They pull a speaker out of the ceiling. by transforming
Arthur Wilkins.
Nosferatu into a bat, but they have to like throw him up there because he's
not a good bat.
He's not good at flying. But anyway, he brings it down, and there's this weird pink fleshy tube on the end of it, and they realize that the queen of this colony of creatures is the mall itself, and underneath this sort of marble-looking veneer with its glass windows
There's
is
guts.
weird flesh, and it's just gross. And then they're going to blow it up. And I also love all of the cool spell names that they're using when they're discussing how they're going to blow it up. And then the dean decides he's going to use 3 of them all at once and just chuck them in, and they're going to have to get out. But he puts them on a delay, that classic thing. Because they have to go back in because they get rescued, and then they realize Wendell is still stuck in there.
He's being a hero. He's like dismantling the queen.
Yeah, but he can't get out, and he's not going to die, so he's a bit freaked out. But they go back in for him, and just as they're trying to get out, Schleppel the bogeyman like steps out from behind his door and is huge and strong, and he just sort of smashes things and helps them escape. And then he's like talking about, I'm just going to wander around now. I don't have to be behind anything. Look at me. And then they're like, we've got a really good cellar at the university.
Do you want to maybe go there?
Has it got rats? And cobwebs. Some of the rats are huge. And the Charge Chancellor is like, I don't want him in my cellar. And it's like, would you rather he was under your bed? It's like, what? Oh, okay.
He's nice. I'll be like, it's fine. He'll protect me from things.
I really love Schleppel, and I also really love the way he simply seems to decide he likes Wendell, and he just decides to be with Wendell.
And he finds the joy in everything. Like when Wendell lets him be behind his door, he's like, oh, it's got like doorknobs and stuff. And
this is a great door.
Oh, there's spiders in here.
Yeah.
That was my favorite pun when they described it as a security door because he has to hide behind it all the time. Oh, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they destroy it. And then that becomes pretty much, the end of that plot.
Yeah, it's like they're not quite sure what's supposed to happen next.
Yeah, and although I did like how, when it first is nearly ready to open, it releases that sort of pod and all of the sort of grand sale leaflets come out. But then at the end, when it's dying, there's all these bits left over.
Closing
and they're
down
just
sale.
Closing down sale, yeah.
Everything must go.
Yeah. There's also Wendell's sort of last thing that he wants to do before he goes back to the university is try and matchmake Lupine and Ludmilla together because for 1 week out of the month, they're both going to be wolf people. Whereas then the rest of the time, one of them's a wolf and one of them's a person. So it's like, but they could be happy. That might be nice.
And I think, certainly Lupine is on board with that. He really likes Ludmilla.
Yeah.
It is alluded to in the book, but it's like you do wonder what's going to happen that first time it happens, how she's going to go dealing with that, where she's going to be like, yep, cool, or she's going to be like, you've been following me around and I've been patting you on the head.
Yeah.
But at least they established that there's pants in the house.
Well, yes, that's very important.
Yeah.
I think that might soften the blow just a little bit.
Hopefully. Yeah. Death's sort of got this epilogue too where he's defeated the new Death, but the auditors are like, so what? We'll get another one. I'm not 100% clear exactly how he sells his return to them or whether they're sort of like...
They're overruled.
Yeah.
He goes and speaks to Azrael.
Yeah, he does. And which is one of the best things in the book. Although I think... because Sarah, you and I have the paperback version. And in the original hardcover, when Death goes to talk to Azrael and asks him for his favour, we've got to compare these, Liz.
Yes, we should.
We should, because in my edition, it's this.
Excuse me?
Yeah, like it's massive. So
even the full stop doesn't make it fully onto the page there.
When Azrael speaks, it's a massive font, just massive text size, fills up the whole page in the paperback. But yours is at least formatted correctly in the sense that what was supposed to happen in the original book, it was on a left-hand side page so that you didn't see it coming until you turned the page, whereas they've screwed it up for the paperback and it's on the right-hand page. So like a whole page before he says anything, you can see that he's going to say yes to Death's request.
And it draws you straight to it because of course it does.
Yeah. And Death gets all his classic lines. There's no hope but us. There's no mercy but us. There is no justice. There is just us, which made me think like when he's reassembling all of the little animal deaths back to him and then he sort of teams up with the death of rats and the death of fleas. I'm like, oh, is that the Just Us League? That's awesome. I thought that's my stupid pun. He says the classic line of the book, Lord, what can the harvest hope for if not for the care of the reaper man? And he's like, well, look, what's the point of doing my job if I don't do it with compassion? And Azrael's like, yes, but much louder than that.
Yeah. Was that his normal talking voice, though?
I think that's his normal voice. I think, if he's like the death of the universe,
Oh, yeah.
The death of the multiverse. It's like, yeah.
I meant much louder than I could say it.
Yes,
For podcast
yes.
purposes. I don't want anyone listening to this to go deaf.
And you probably don't
To go
want
death.
I don't want that either. Please stay alive,
Probably
listeners.
don't want to blow out the mic either.
Well, he gets reinstated, and also he asks for a little extra time for a certain person.
Then he goes and swats up on the love stories of past time. I wonder if he went to Isabel's room and just like harvested her favorite ones.
Yeah. Well, see, this is the part where, you know, I was saying before, I was hoping it wasn't kind of a love story because I didn't think that was a good angle to go with death. At this point, I'm like, oh, now it is going love story. And it kind of would have made sense. Like, they do have that sort of lovely chemistry and they get to know each other. It's nice. But at the same
He's
time,
really
I was
got
like,
his feet under the table. The guy's like,
it's so weird. Now he's doing all this romance stuff. He's like stealing the biggest diamond in the world in a very Indiana
I
Jones
love that entire
inspired
bit.
sequence.
But no, the flowers first, like, yes, all of them with a ribbon, and then chocolate. So where there's like a pillowed case with cats, and he's like, "What's the pillow? Is it for sitting on? Are they cat flavored?" And he gets angry because he's like,
Yeah,
"Death and cats."
this is not what it should be. And then they bring out is it Dark Seductions?
Yeah,
And he's like, this is correct.
And then he's like, "Is there anything else I should be getting?" Like in a panicked voice, she's like, "Oh well, diamonds are a girl's best friend." Then he goes to a diamond shop, and the guy keeps showing him diamonds. And he's like, "Yes, but how friendly is
How
it?"
friendly is this one? Yeah.
I'm sorry, sir, we don't base things on the friendliness of the diamonds. I do love when he then finds out that the biggest diamond in the world is Offler's diamond.
Yeah.
And there's the high priest and there's the priest, and they take turns because no one ever comes there because it's the lost temple. And finally they're listening to all the traps being sprung, and it's like, oh, we haven't had one for the crocodile alley in a while. or for that one. Oh my goodness, someone's going to make it through the door. And they look at each other in great terror and say, Mrs. Cake. And I just think it's such a great bit. And then next thing they know, the diamond's gone, and they're kind of like, well, crap.
Well, but who will know? It's just us.
Yeah.
No one will know. We're a lost temple.
Yes, exactly.
I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah, so that was all great.
He finally goes to see Miss Flitworth. He presents her with all the things, and he's like, "Here's this, and a diamond for you to be friends with."
Yeah, and it's like the size of a football or something. Like, it's massive. And he offers to take her anywhere she wants to go, in like all of space and time, and she just wants to go to the harvest dance because that's on tonight.
And that's what she would be doing anyway.
Yeah, so they do, and they dance, and Death insists that the guy keep playing. There's that great bit where she says, "Do you dance?" And he says, "Famed for it, Miss Flipworth." Like, oh yes, many people dance with Death.
And play Monopoly with Death, apparently, from an earlier bit.
Yeah, that's true.
He was the boot.
Oh, yeah.
Just like, no. That just reminded me of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, where they're trying to get one over on Death, and he's expecting them to play chess, but they want to play all these weird board games, including Guess Who and the Game of Life, and just nonsense.
Miss Flitworth is not going to have the wool pulled over her eyes. She realizes that she's going to die tonight, and she keeps being like, and she like calls him on it, but then there's like this really good reveal
that she's already dead.
When he first popped up, she goes, "Yo, you gave me a start," and he goes, "Well, actually, I gave you a stop."
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know that I know that it has all the hallmarks of a romantic gesture, but I'm not sure that it is a romantic gesture. I think it's almost like turn down service. Like, you've been my friend, you've been my confidant, you've been here for me in a way that other humans haven't. So I'm going to give you what I can give you.
Yeah.
In thanks. And particularly the way he then at the end deposits her in the right frame of time to basically leave with Rufus.
Yeah.
To me, it's not even though it has all the hallmarks of a romantic action, I think it's compassion, and I think it's a thank you in lots of ways.
Well, I really like that bit where she looks down at herself. She's like, "Oh, you made some changes." He's like, "No, time, like life made some changes." And there's that really great bit where they're exploring the idea that people have like an inherent age. Like, you know how some people are born middle-aged. Yeah. And she sort of said, "Oh, well, it's nice that I guess inside all along I was 18.
Yeah.
Which is like, I assume the age that she was going to marry Rufus.
Yeah, I think certainly when you hear some of her backstory, you get the feeling that she's like frozen in time as this young father's daughter thing. Like, she still focuses on things the way her father taught them they should be. She still focuses in on Rufus. Like, she never turned away from the person she was at that point.
Her life stopped sort of there, or like plateaued.
Yeah.
Which I find kind of sad and disappointing. I mean, like as a device, it's great, and she sort of leaves that behind when she dies, and she certainly hasn't stopped living in some ways. But I mean, there's a creepy scene where Death, before he does all this, goes to her house and like looks in her chests to see that she does in fact have a whole bunch of gold in there,
like everyone's been telling him the whole time.
And she also has a chest that's got all these keepsakes, which are like, you know, her old wedding dress and her old shoes from the wedding, and she's kept all that stuff. And eventually they use some of the wedding dress to sharpen the scythe and stuff, but it's in there, and she's sort of, frozen in time like you suggest. I think for me, I would have liked it if he had done all these things for her, but he hadn't been specifically looking up romantic things to do for her. Like if he'd just been there for her as a friend rather than, you know, as this sort of romantic payoff partner interest thing.
But she's got the diamond to be friends with, so
I guess that's true. Who needs another friend when you got a diamond the size of a football?
Don't they throw it on stage during the dance?
Oh, they leave it. They give it to the fiddler to keep him playing.
Yeah, I have to admit, during that scene, I actually always picture the band from Back to the Future 3 because they play the same bit of music over and over again. They stop and they start again.
That's ZZ Top, isn't it?
That band is ZZ Top.
Is that Well, actually, with the beards, yes. Of
and
course
they wrote a song for the film, but it was not a big hit, so no one remembers it the way they remember The Power of Love.
Yeah,
it should have been a hit.
It's over the credits or something, but the way they play the same tune over and over, it's like... I just picture. I
can hear that song in my head right now. I've watched that film too many times.
No, I was raised on Back to the Future.
I do. Also, there's like when they're doing the dance and they're talking about they're doing a tango, and Death says maracas. I don't need no maracas.
Yes,
like that's great. Well, there's two other things that happen at the end of the book. Wendell finally gets his death on the brass bridge, where he'd previously tried jumping into the Ankh to see if it would help. It did not.
It's a real angsty thing to do.
And Colin's like, "You're not gonna jump off it again, are you, sir?"
Like, no, I'm not going to do that.
He gets a note, doesn't he?
He does. He gets a note from Mr. Ixolite,
who has clearly sidled up somewhere and then sidled away.
Yeah, Death comes. He gets a few last sort of cliche. In fact, he's quite a string of cliches at the end there, which is, you know, I feel like if anybody deserved them, it was Wendell. And that great line at the end, that was your life, which was nice. Death recalls all of the other deaths back into himself, except for the death of rats and the death of fleas. I'd totally forgotten the death of fleas.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't know if it shows up again.
No, because the death of rats you see again many times. It's kind of wonderful.
And they argue about whether he should ride, you know, like a cat or a terrier. And he's like, no, it should be a terrier. And the death of fleas can ride it as well. And of course, he ends up with quite a different steed later on, but we'll leave that for a future discussion.
Yes.
How do we feel about the ending of the book? Were we very satisfied? I mean, I think I found it quite satisfying. What do you think? I
thought it was good because Death, he's alone because like they're him, but he's gotten a little bit more humanity, but he's not Bill Dorr. Like he's regressed back, but I wouldn't like to see him alone again. So it's kind of nice that he's kind of got a little club of his own.
Yeah. I mean, it reminded me. I was on another podcast called Once and for All.
You're on another podcast?
I was a guest.
Sacrilege.
I'm sorry, but it's a podcast in which two fictional characters are pitted against each other in battle, and the guests argue about which one would win.
That sounds awesome.
And I was on there to talk about the death of the Discworld and the death of the Endless from the Sandman comics.
Okay.
And we talked about the fact that the death of the Endless spends one day every century living a mortal life and dying. And I'm like, yeah, but if you do that every century, surely you know you're just going to go back and be death again. And supposedly it sort of grounds her and makes her feel like she's, you know, human. But I kind of feel like in this book, you know, Death had his job taken away. He's been fired. He's going to die. And he has this experience of living his life thinking that's it and not choosing to do it and wiping his memory of who he is, but dying knowing he's death and is still going to be no one. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways, he has a more authentic experience of what death is going to be like than Death of the Endless has, where she becomes a mortal human and doesn't remember being death. So she's not really giving up all that she is. She's just giving up this sort of pretend life that she's created for the purposes of dying, you know. Not that I want to put her down. I think she's a fantastic character as well. But yeah, it occurred to me that that's a real thing that he's been through and that he's clearly going to be a bit different after that. Although he was already very compassionate and caring beforehand. Are there any bits that we really enjoyed that people want to talk about?
When Death meets the Grim Squeaker for the first time at the death of rats, they have that good conversation in Squeaks, and he goes, I guess you could murder a cheese or something like that. Because death is like, I could murder a curry.
Yeah, it was a nice callback.
Yeah.
How about you, Sarah? Are there any favourite bits we haven't talked about?
I really like the way, even though they're really two disparate plots to me, they do have some similarities. There's a part where really very close together, I think, is the end of a Windle section and the start of a Death section. They both say, maybe life is something you acquire.
Oh, yeah.
And I really like that line because I think it says a lot about what both Windle and Death decide to do with their surprise time. I mean, Windle's is surprise extra time and Death's is surprise less time.
Mm.
But both of them basically decide, I'm going to do something with this. And in some ways, Windle has more of a life once he's dead than he did beforehand. And in lots of ways, Death has more life than maybe he ever expected to have.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I really like that line, and I really like that sentiment, I guess.
Yeah.
How about you, Ben?
Oh, I really like the line where the priest Ridcully says, I suppose there's not some kind of magic you don't know about. And Ridcully says, if there is, we don't know about it. And he says, fair enough. I'm like, yeah, I enjoyed that sort of frank exchange. But yeah, there's just so many good gags.
I do love Miss Flitworth. Why does not the cockerel crow properly?
Oh, and he writes the note for Cyril the crow. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's
cockerel,
like, this you will read, he said. Cyril peered myopically at the cock-a-doodle-doo in heavy Gothic script. Somewhere in his tiny, mad chicken mind, a very distinct and chilly understanding formed that he'd better learn to read very, very quickly. And then later it's like he's learnt to read, but it turns out he's dyslexic. And it's like Dockaloodle Fog or something like that. I really, it's just one of those moments of Pratchett madness that is what makes him so good.
Oh, actually, I just thought of another line that I really liked. And this is not a gag, but when they're talking about, or he's talking about how belief works. And, you know, there's this long... It's a theme throughout the Discworld books that belief creates gods and those sorts of creatures rather than the other way around. But there was a line that said, belief can't move mountains, but it can create someone who can. And I was like, oh, that's good. I like that. I thought that was very clever.
And I just remembered one that I really liked is when they were discussing how the wizards normally didn't fit into normal society and they were talking to Veterinary about paying taxes. And he was talking about paying it per capita. And if they didn't want to pay per capita, de capita could be arranged.
That's right. And they end up saying, well, we'll give a voluntary donation that just happens to be the amount of tax you wanted. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. That sort of lovely bureaucracy of it, of as long as all the right words are on this, we're okay with this. I also, I really like when he's sharpening the scythe and talking about what's right and what's wrong. I've never been very sure about what is right, said Bill Dorr. I am not sure there is such a thing as right or wrong, just places to stand. And I kind of like that. It's lovely, deep Pratchett.
Yeah, and I like how much she disagrees with him as well. It's like, no, there's a right and a wrong, and we know which one's which.
Yes, and the revenue is wrong.
Yeah. Well, look, we've got quite a few listener questions, so we should get on to those.
But in terms of questions, we got a few really good ones from Sally Evans, one of which we covered, which is about the two sort of separate storylines and the trolleys one and how that fit in with the general bigger picture. They also asked another one, which was, what's the deal with Azrael? In that this is maybe the only time that the Discworld universe is shown as definitively having some kind of cosmic intelligence involved. Thoughts, feelings, and opinions?
For me, he's the death of the universe, and there's that idea that there are deaths on many worlds, and so we know that there's more than one, and there's this idea that, well, the whole universe has to die, so someone has to take care of that, and it's going to be this creature, Azrael, which is not a reference to Gargamel's cat, by the way. I was looking this up. It's the angel of death from Islam. And the classic depiction of Azrael is that they are an angel with millions of eyes, like as many eyes as there will ever be people who live. And every time a person is born, when they die, he closes one of his eyes. And when all his eyes are closed, he dies. And that's the end of the universe. And I was like, wow, that's a cool story. Bit sad, but amazing. But it is interesting that there is this higher organization of the auditors, though, as well.
Because they do come back in later, in at least Hogfather.
I think they might be in Thief of Time as well.
Oh, I adore Thief of Time, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's not clear where they come from because they don't seem to be created by the belief of people. although I guess maybe their shape is. So that's a really interesting question, actually, now that I think about it. I was all ready to go, well, I don't know that there is. I think there's just a death of the universe. But then I'm like, no, because there's the auditors as well, and that indicates there's this whole system that
there's
has
middle management.
Yeah, and it's above the Discworld. Like they are, outside of just that sphere of influence, although we only ever encounter them when they're interested in the Discworld. So, yeah, I guess the answer is I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think it's the only time that cosmic intelligence is involved. Certainly there's a suggestion of a broader universe outside. Like, at the end of the day, Artwin swims through space. There are other places. Has to be some sort of cosmic intelligence, I think, because personally I think there has to be more imagination in that universe than there is in this one, because let's face it, most worlds don't ride around on elephants on a turtle that swims through space.
That we know of.
I mean, I feel like the disc is not impossible in our universe. I mean, it
highly
is
improbable.
Highly improbable, but that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
So I feel like, I think there are other indications of cosmic intelligence. I think the whole inspiration particle thing as well, because that seems like that's been set up, and the fact that it doesn't always arrive where it's supposed to be, that implies an intelligence trying to do things and getting them wrong. I think it's probably the most direct time that you see cosmic intelligence in the Discworld, but I think it's certainly not the only instance.
Yeah. Okay.
Next question is just from me. And it's from Nick Shadle. Where did you get that amazing edition, and why doesn't my copy look like that? I can answer the first one. I got it from Readings Carlton, but they're widely available. It's the new Collector's Library edition. The whole Discworld series has not been released yet in this format, and so they're available sort of all over the place. I've seen them in all kinds of stores.
In fact, in the show notes to our previous episode, there is a link to the Discworld Emporium where they sell them online, so you can find them there. We'll put another link in the show notes for this one.
Great. So now that I've hogged a question, let's ask another one. So this one's from Hopscotch Friday, who says, that was my very first Pratchett. That damn Josh Kirby cover art. I guess I'd be curious to know just how bad an idea you think it was to read this Pratchett first.
I don't think it's a terrible first Pratchett, because it deals a lot with death, and I think death is so much what's underneath the whole Discworld itself. And I think also the other sort of key pillar is the wizards, and there they are. And it's mostly the wizards you get to know over the remainder of the books rather than the sort of interchangeable ones you get earlier. So it's not a terrible place to come in.
It is like a taster plate, like we've talked about before. Like, it's kind of good to start in one where you get that cross section, so you get a bit of a glimpse of the City Watch with Colin. You get to meet Dibbler. You just get to meet a good cross section of the community. And I guess a rule of thumb with, do we think it was a bad idea to start with that? Did he keep reading them? And if he did, then it wasn't a bad idea.
Yeah, okay.
To be absolutely truthful, the Josh Kirby covers significantly delayed my entrance into reading Pratchett. I saw the cartoons as a kid, but I would wander around the library at school because that was my favourite place to be. I was a library captain and everything.
Your school had a library captain?
Yeah.
What is
a library captain?
Basically, it mostly meant you were free labour for the library. You checked books in and out.
Were there perks? Like, did you get to choose some of the new books that the library got?
I always knew what was coming, and it meant I had an excuse to be there and be in the section. Like, I would say a significant amount of my love of books and reading of books has just been hiding out in that library. And I used to look at the Josh Kirby covers and go, this doesn't look like a book I want to read. As an adult, I look at the art and go, yeah, maybe it's cool. I can sort of get behind it. But at least for your soft fantasy reading, maybe even female, it's not an easy way to come to them because it doesn't look like something you want to read. It doesn't look like the sort of fantasy covers they put on, say, a book written by a woman.
Yeah.
All right, our next question comes from Sir Sarah Dudley. So, although Reaper Man isn't my favourite Discworld, it did inspire Paul Kidby's Lancre Gothic, which is one of my favourite Discworld images. Any of you have a favourite piece of Pratchett-inspired art? I'm going to quickly start with no.
Okay.
For me. Because, there's such a broad cross-section, I can't choose.
Death with the Kitten from Last Hero.
Oh, Yeah.
I've got that at home, and I remember. Oh, and that's in the bit where the turtle looks back at, I think it's Rincewind, when they're in space.
That's Paul Kidby, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
Some great art in that book.
I think also the whole of Where's My Cow is a lot of fun.
Haven't we all in some way lost our cow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, deep existential loss of cow.
Yeah, well, I remember back this morning when there was one like that stood around 40 minutes, 40 whole minutes.
Yeah.
Those were the days,
Yeah.
the hours.
Yeah.
Now, I actually do have one. It's a very recent one. Paul Kidby's just completed a new version of an illustration he did for the His World exhibition, which was over in the UK, of a whole bunch of stuff from Terry Pratchett's office and Discworld paraphernalia. And I think the title of it is The Imaginarium of Professor Pratchett. And it's Terry Pratchett in profile wearing a top hat, and out of the top hat are coming all these different things from his books, including some of the curses from this book, and also a bunch of other characters. And it's a beautiful piece of art that I think really sums up a lot of the ideas that he has. But there's just so many good ones. I mean, how do you choose a favorite? And any picture of Death as the Hogfather is also high up on my list. But I think that new one by Paul Kidby's amazing. I really love it.
I was looking at that in the bookshop the other week, and I was like, ooh, do I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I resisted, but I may not resist much longer.
Yeah, there's a book that accompanies the exhibition. If you're wondering which book we're talking about, we'll put a link in the show notes to it. It's very expensive but very beautiful.
Yes.
I like to backpedal a bit because I stick by I can't choose a favourite, but I would like to mention that George Rex, who's done a past episode with us, does some really good fan art, and I in particular like her Angua.
Oh yeah, that was super cute.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's
so
worth
good.
checking out. So next question and last question is from Ashu and Sneezed. All right, what about this? Who'd be the best voice to do Death? My vote is Alan Rickman.
Oh, that is Alan Rickman. We I mean, look, I know it's Death, but we should probably choose someone who's alive to
Christopher
do this
Lee.
voice.
Oh no.
Oh, well, this
I
is the
know.
thing. In almost all of the adaptations, cartoon or live action, in everything except the Hogfather, it is Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
And he's perfect. He's perfect. I feel like maybe Charles Dance, Tywin Lannister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. He is veterinary in, I think, Hogfather.
Yes.
I think if you have to do without Christopher Lee, which of course we do, I think maybe Charles Dance isn't a horrible choice. But yeah, I think Christopher Lee being gone from the world has robbed us of the perfect voice for Death.
We talked about this in the Mort episodes, and I think that, any of the big three of the Hammer horror film sort of era could have done a great job of it, like Peter Cushing.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not Vincent Price, but Peter Cushing would have been a great Death voice as well. I thought Ian Richardson did a great job in Hogfather.
Yeah. He works. I guess I'd just gotten so used to Christopher Lee that
Yeah.
it was like, this isn't right.
Alan Rickman also, good choice. I'm trying to think who else has got I mean, you want someone with kind of a really deep voice with a lot of gravitas, don't you?
But
Yeah.
not scary either.
Yeah, like a deep but pleasant voice.
I mean, you'd almost say Morgan Freeman. Like, you can almost get away with Morgan Freeman.
If he could do an English accent.
Yeah, that's true. It is so quintessentially English somehow, the Pratchett world.
Yeah.
The name that comes to my mind, and I can't hear his voice, which doesn't work well, is Jeremy Irons, because
Yes.
he
would be
commands a
fantastic.
room.
Yes.
Whenever he's in a scene, that's all you're looking at, no matter what he's doing. And I feel like that's a combination of presence, his voice, and everything. So I
Yeah.
feel like that could work.
You know who else? Ian McKellen.
That's exactly what I was about to suggest.
Because also he's really good at being, he's really
Yeah.
funny when he needs to be funny. I think he could really nail it as well.
And similarly, Patrick Stewart as well.
Oh, imagine, what if they both did it and you blended their voices together?
Oh, jeez.
They would have so much fun doing that as well.
They would.
Being best mates.
Or
and
them each being one of the deaths in the showdown.
all. Oh, no.
Yeah, that could be pretty
That would be
amazing.
wonderful.
Okay. All right. I think we've solved the problem. I think we've done it.
We found some people who are alive, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Few. But Patrick's just going to be busy being Jean-Luc Picard again. Sorry, I had to say it. It's so exciting.
It's like must suppress huge inner squee at that.
I was like, oh, it's April, is it? Okay, no, it's not.
It's real. It's happening. But look, thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. It's been heaps of fun.
It's been great having you. We hope that if you ever get asked any more Discworld questions, you will not be asked such horrendously difficult ones.
I do deeply wish that I'd been able to answer just one. Just one. I would have felt better about things.
But did you not answer any? I thought you got at least one of them.
Of the 5 hard ones at the end, I was very close to one. Specifically, Sir Terry's crest has Latin. The question was, what's the Latin? I'd looked up what it meant. I couldn't remember the Latin. I still don't remember the Latin. It's don't fear the Reaper. And there's actually a Moorpork owl on his crest as well.
Oh,
It's kind of amazing. It's on the Wikipedia page if you want to see it. It's pretty cool.
we'll put a link to that in the show notes
And I
too.
will listen to Blue Oyster Cult while looking at it.
As we always do, we like to tell you what book we'll be reading next. And so, Liz, next time, what are we reading?
Witches Abroad.
Oh, yes. We have decided we're doing 3 in a row. Episode 11, book number 11 in the Discworld. And episode 12 will be book number 12 in the Discworld.
It's very tidy. Like, I feel like the Burster would enjoy that.
Yeah. It won't last, so enjoy it while it does. And who will be our guest, Liz?
Jackie Tang. It's going to be really good.
Yeah. And look, we'll be recording the next episode quite close to the time this one comes out. So please get your questions in for Witches Abroad as soon as possible. You can tweet them to us or send them to us on other social media using the hashtag Pratchett12. And of course, if you'd like to join the conversation about this episode and Reaper Man, please tweet at us and use the hashtag Pratchett11. And look, thanks again to everyone who's been spreading the word about the podcast. It's been lovely. We're coming up on a full year of episodes, which is quite exciting for us. We've got hopefully some interesting and exciting announcements coming in the next few months about maybe some special episodes, but we'll wait until things are confirmed before we tell you about that. But until then, please do keep telling people about us. And also remember that you don't need to fear the Reaper Man. You've been listening to Pratchett, a monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast with Pratchetters Elizabeth Flux, Ben McKenzie, that's me, and guest Sarah Pearson. Pratchett is produced and edited by me, with music by David Ashton of Sample and Hold Studios. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Pratchett Podcast or on the web at pratchettpodcast.com. Join the conversation for this episode using the hashtag Pratchett11.
Pratchett is brought to you by Splendid Chaps Productions. We make entertainment for your ears, like the Doctor Who podcast Splendid Chaps and time travel comedy series Night Terrace. To find out more, visit splendidchaps.com.